Okay, Alderwoman Davis, you can begin your meeting.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
We are calling to order our Ways and Means Committee hearing today. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Boyd,
Present.
Alderman Vaquero,
Present.
Alderwoman Howard,
Present.
Alderwoman Boyd, Alderwoman Spencer,
Present.
Alderman Muhammad.
Here.
Alderman Oldenburg, Alderwoman Navarro,
Present.
Alderwoman Middlebrook,
Present.
Alderwoman Evans,
Present.
Chairwoman Davis,
Present.
Alderwoman Boyd, Alderman Oldenburg. You have 9 present. You have quorum.
Thank you very much. Before we open the meeting, I'd just like to give a few points of understanding. This is a hearing. There is no intent to have a vote about anything today. We have an agenda before us that we will follow. We will be very courteous to our guests who are presenting, and we will also make sure that the public has the opportunity to understand us as we are conversing. So most times we're used to using language that they may not necessarily understand. So always talk and give the proper names and titles. Like E&A, please say the Board of Estimate and Apportionment. Let's make sure that our public has the opportunity to really grasp what we're saying and have as much clarity as possible. So as we're moving forward, our agenda gives us our first item. But before we get to that, we got to approve our minutes from Wednesday, May 2nd.
I'll make that
I'm moving for
motion.
approval of minutes dated May 7th.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and second to approve our minutes from Wednesday,
May 12th.
May 12th. I'm sorry, Wednesday, May 12th.
I amend my motion to approve the minutes May 12th.
Madam Clerk,
Second.
would you please call the roll.
I'm sorry, who seconded that?
I did.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Howard also. So.
Got it, thanks. Alderman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderman Vaquero,
Aye.
Alderwoman Howard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd, Alderwoman Spencer,
Aye.
Alderman Muhammad,
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg,
Aye.
Alderwoman Navarro,
Aye.
Alderwoman Middlebrook,
Aye.
Alderwoman Evans,
Aye.
Chairwoman Davis.
Aye.
10 aye votes.
Thank you. Our minutes have been approved. So our first item for our board bill review is the introduction of the budget and explanation by our budget director, Paul Payne. Paul, please proceed.
Thank you and good morning, Madam Chairwoman and members of the Ways and Means Committee. I am going to share a screen now and hopefully this comes up correctly. And hopefully you can all see the presentation before you. The proposed annual operating plan for FY22 totals $1,153,000,000.6 million. That's an increase of 3.9% over the current fiscal year. And that box below shows the components by various categories of funds. The general fund being the largest of those categories is $511.5 million. That's a 6.2% increase. I'm getting a lot of detail actually about the general fund changes. Most of that reflects some of the return of steps that we took this year in the pandemic year to balance this year's budget. In special revenue funds, we actually have a total budget of $191.3 million. That's actually only down 0.1%, but there's a lot of movement within the special fund categories. You've got increases as revenues would increase, for instance, in the C&T fund, the GBL trust fund, gaming revenues, use tax fund, and those funds are up. Meanwhile, the Convention Sports Facility Trust Fund, which is mostly hotels, tax revenue, that was actually down. We got that this year. The Communications Fund, Economic Development Fund, there was some one-time appropriations this year that would not be repeated, and so those are going to be down as well. So there's ups and downs within those fund categories. Grant funds, $67.2 million. That's primarily flat. The debt service fund, that's payments on our general obligation funded debt. That's $8.2 million. That includes the issuance last year of the Prop NS, an issuance of NS. So that reflects a slight increase from last year. The capital improvement funds, that's up at $30.1 million. That's 12.7% increase. And the primary reason you see that is because most of, actually over 75% of our revenues to the capital fund are sales tax related. And of course, sales tax is one of the harder hit revenues in the current fiscal year, and we're expecting that that's going to improve next fiscal year. And the enterprise fund category, that's airport and water divisions, it's $248.4 million. That's 1.1%. The airport actually is down 3% of $5 million. But in the water division, they're actually up 11%, but that's only because they are appropriating funds for repair, about $7.9 million up entirely, but that's for appropriating funds from their contingency fund for repairs. So that's not a recurring operating cost, but it is part of their budget this year, this proposed budget. Internal service funds, $96.9 million, that's 7.9% increase. Internal service funds includes all the health insurance payments and all. It's mostly items that departments charge to each other, so it's not a tax or revenue type fund. And you can see from the chart below, the general fund still is the largest component of the total budget, 44%. These next series of slides, I wanted to brief you on how we're doing this year. If you recall, when we were at this point last year, the economy had been basically come to a halt. And so the question was, how do we estimate revenues in that kind of environment? And there was no playbook for that. So the approach was to be somewhat conservative on the revenues and just follow as we went. And then if that was not sufficient, then we'd have contingencies in place to address any shortfalls. So looking at the two larger tax sources, earnings tax and payroll tax collections, earnings tax is actually exceeding projections so far. Now, I should point out that, remember, part of our earnings tax revenue was deferred because the IRS deferred the payments from last fiscal year into this fiscal year. So you take that into account, it's still up 4.8%. But you'll note that April comparison is higher because it's comparing with the April in which there were deferred taxes. But it's still outperforming what the estimated results were. If one area of the earnings tax I always look at, because it's less subject to volatility, is the withholdings, which is the amounts that are taken out of year-to-night checks and among anyone else paying the earnings tax. And through the third quarter, withholdings were down about 4%. So that's actually is, if you look at that historically, that is recession. That's worse than the last recession. But the underlying result, however, is not as bad as anticipated. We were looking at something as high as 15% decline overall. So it's doing better. And so that's earnings tax. Payroll tax, similarly, that declined through year to date, 7.1%. That's actually worse than FY 9 or 10. The worst we saw in FY 10 in the last recession was down 6.9%. But as I said, it's not as bad as we had anticipated with the budget. So we saw a significant decline, but we were prepared for worse. It's basically what we're looking at with these two taxes. Moving on to the sales tax. Now, we talk a lot about the earnings tax, but the sales tax as well if you add up all the various rates in the various funds, it's comparable in size to the earnings tax in terms of revenue. So it's a key source of revenue for the city. And I'll say that fiscal year to date, eerily close to estimates. We were down 24.3% through the month of May. And May reports, that's actually activity for April, but we received the reports in May, and we'll have one more report this fiscal year. Estimates were down 23.5%. So it's actually very close, although it was still trailing as of last month. Now, contrary to that trend, the local use tax, which is out-of-state purchases, you saw a lot of online sales. That has seen increases over the last year. But I've updated this since I made the presentation to the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, and results show that it's up 14.1% year to date. And I didn't, when we did the estimates, didn't make a monthly estimate. We just said across the board 5% decline. So it's outperforming estimates for the fiscal year. But you'll note that, and I pointed this out earlier, was that the coming months are going to be a little bit more difficult to compare, because if you look at May, 3.52 million, that's comparable to pre-pandemic levels of the about 3.5 back in May of 19. This May and June surge we saw last year is unlikely to be repeated. So you are going to see, I expect, another decline in June, bringing that down, that amount down. However, while use tax is outperforming estimates, it's unfortunately not close to even offsetting the decline in sales tax. Now, hotel and restaurant taxes, these are two of the hardest hit industries in the past year. Hotels in particular, through the third quarter, were down over 72%. That's actually even worse than what we had estimated at about 60%. So it's going to be a while. You can see the progression. The first quarter, they were down 83%, about a 10% increase in the second quarter, another 10% increase or so in the third quarter. So it's slowly coming back. And we hope to see that with restrictions lifted recently, that we'll continue to see that. Going down to the restaurant tax, I did update these numbers. There were some corrections in the general ledger since then, that they were down over 40%. Now it's actually going down 36% in the fiscal year, which is actually better than estimated. We had it down at 50. But you can also, again, see that first quarter was down over 50%. And then it's slowly been increases similar to the restaurant, the hotel, as the months progress. So what does that leave us in terms of revenue? Well, currently in the general fund, we're tracking over this year's budget estimate. I haven't updated this, pending a lot in the fourth quarter with some big numbers that still due. We were still tracking over in the $6-7 million range on general fund. And then all these other funds combined as well, to excess of 10 million. But you can see where the increases and decreases are, particularly with the sales tax being short. I did this illustration just indicating what would, if you looked at the pre-pandemic year of FY19, what would our revenues, our revised estimates compare to? And you can see through actual FY20, we were off by, we saw a shortfall or what we previously would have had of over $24 million in these special funds. The FY21 revised, we would be off by over $60 million. And the FY22 budget, improving, though not there, would be over by $44 million. As we talk more, as we move more towards deliberations on the ARPA funds, which are the American Rescue Plan Act, there is actually there is a methodology for calculating what the losses would be. They take FY19 and then they apply a sort of a default inflation rate of 4.1%. Which was actually greater than what our actual growth rate was, and you take the maximum, whichever is greater, and sort of apply that. So this methodology of calculating is going to be different than this. This is just illustrative of the significant impact that COVID had on our revenue base. Okay, looking into FY22, with the approach basically we took is that, if you recall, we took a lot of steps to balance this current fiscal 21 budget reallocating funds and doing those things that we needed to do to keep it balanced. So the approach in going forward to FY22 was to try to say, okay, on a status quo basis, undoing all those special reallocations, what would the gap be? And so looking forward, here was our estimate of 41.6. If we said we were tracking about 6 million higher than that through the third quarter, and then had some adjusted growth after adjusting for the deferred earnings taxes that we had this year, it gives you a base of about $494.1 million. And using this year's budget, we said, well, what increases and decreases would we experience that we need to budget for next year? And these are listed here. We had some one-time balancing measures in citywide accounts, which is Department 190 in your budget book. A lot of the debt and lease payments were offset to capital and other funds. That's about $7.7 million. We also used a fund balance in the health insurance fund to offset the department's health insurance line. You'll see that throughout the budget. So we had to increase that again because that was a one-time use. And then we had some special offsets in some of the balances that were in some of these special funds, everything from PDA, the Parks Division, Circuit Attorney, and Human Services funds, which we had utilized this year, which then we were not going to be able to utilize going forward. That was about $17 million. In police, and going to actual increases, we had to budget for the matrix steps, their health insurance as well. That's a little under $1 million. We did have the full cost of the body cameras that we needed to appropriate. Last year, I believe that was an encumbrance from the prior year, so we actually had to budget that item. I think the total cost is about $2.7 million, including personnel. This was the non-personnel portion of that. Police retirement system, their costs actually went down $2.6 million, their contribution for next year. Now, we did have some offsetting revenues that we needed to accommodate. Actually, the sales tax base, since they're going up, that relieves pressure on the general fund a bit. So that's why that's a decline. And then, as you are aware, at the Board of Estimate and Apportionment last month, we reduced $4 million in the salary accounts to reflect 98 vacant police uniform positions, and then subsequently decrease the subsidy from the use tax fund. So that was from a general fund standpoint, a $0 change, but it provided more money in the use tax fund allocations. The fire department and fire pension, similar things going on there as with police. You had the matrix steps and the attrition, health insurance. That was about 1.6 million. However, on their retirement system, they went up 1.9 million. That was to the old fire retirement system. Their contribution was increased. On corrections, in their base budget, they were proposing regular increases similar to other departments with the health insurance and all that, and then a $700,000 security contract. That was their base budget before. But in proposing to the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, again, this included the initiative to close MSI, which would result in consolidating both CJC and MSI into one budget unit, which was a net cut of 90 vacant positions and no provision for that security contract, which was a reduction of 3.1 million. However, additional funds were added for contractual detainee housing if you have to house an outstate facility of 1.4 million, and then 3 new initiatives related to $500,000 for a correctional investigation unit in the Civilian Oversight Board. That's for $300,000. PDA for re-envisioning some of the Justice Center and MSI facility of $200,000, and additional funds for a supportive reentry program in the health department at $1.3 million. So that's how those changes balanced out for the MSI closure. Now, non-uniform employee pay and benefits, these are basically across all departments. You had the civilian pay increase, 3% merit from this fiscal year. We typically don't budget in the current fiscal year in which it occurs because it's anniversary base, but it does increase the base going into the next fiscal year. So that's the $3.1 million. The employee retirement system, again, this is non-police and fire, actually also was increased $2.3 million. So their contribution went up from 13.1 or 2% to 15.4% in a contribution. So you're going to see that we'll talk about pensions a little bit later. And health insurance increases 7.6%. That does not include the one-time fund balance that I talked about earlier. In citywide accounts, you're going to see a lot of changes there. The Enterprise Center lease, that went up. That's going up by $1 million in the line with the ordinance funding that improvements. The Keel Center debt, however, has been paid off this fiscal year, so it will be going away. That was $800,000 decline. The Convention Center debt and the Dome debt, actually, those are offsetting increases. The Dome is being paid off this coming fiscal year with the last payment of $2.5 million. But the Convention Center debt, which we issued last year, was structured to wrap around that elimination. So the Dome debt goes down to by 2.5, and the Convention Center debt goes up by 2.5. Although will stay for 2 more years, paying the $1 million in the Dome preservation asset preservation account. Assessor subsidy that reflects a use of balance last fiscal year. Other workers' comp, we've seen a slight increase there for non-department specific accounts. And then one thing that's unusual this year is that we're not issuing a trans. Usually we issue trans simply to manage our cash throughout the year, and simply because of our improvements in the fund balance as well as other funds as well. The cash flow is not going to be so much of an issue, so there is no anticipated issuance of a trans this year. And that would be for trans, you talk about lingo, that's tax revenue anticipation note, which is a mechanism for managing your cash flow. So that's not going to be necessary this year. General Government and Finance, ITSA, which is the Information Technology Services Agency. We do have the new accounting system, which has been in the works for a couple of years now. That's going to be one of our major increases here at $1.9 million, providing for ongoing licensing and such related to that system. Personnel, they had some promotional testing last year that was not repeated, and they also had some attrition savings for a reduction of $400,000. City Councilor has some legal case software, and then some of those positions that were allocated to the police department last year actually were more reflective of or actually more appropriate in the city councilor's office. So that's where they were added. Comptroller has some additional increases. The telecom audit, they've got a line item for that, as well as some insurance increases. In Department of Parks, we had a resumption of full year of lifeguards. You remember, because the pools were closed, at least the outdoors last year. So that's something that was resumed. We did have some workers' comp settlements had been trending lower in the forest and parks and forestry. Judicial offices, last year they had a budget for half a year for that raise the age provision, which is basically treating the juveniles at the age of 17 as juveniles as opposed to adults. And so the juvenile courts, there was an increase last year. Well, this would be assuming this is a full year impact of that. And so that was about a $300,000 increase. They also, in the court's budget, there's $360,000 for electronic monitoring. That was something that the courts had done as a way of reducing the census counts at the city's correctional facilities. And the sheriff has $150,000 in training and 5 new deputy positions as approved by the courts. They had been reduced in prior years, so that was a restoration of one of the earlier reductions. In the county offices, the Board of Elections, because there's no scheduled elections there, you see that's that every other year you see an increase of about $1 million or so, and then a decrease of $1 million or so, depending on the election schedule. Medical examiner has seen actually a $200,000 increase in contractual services, and then there was a position added during the year. A lot of that is driven by the volume of work they have been receiving, so that's reflective there. In the streets division, there was an initiative for a communications GPS monitoring of about $130,000. What this is when they had their trucks out, their current system was one in which you didn't have it live where you'd know where all the trucks were, but you would have something downloaded at the end of the day when they returned. This is more of a live monitoring, so you would know during the day, and it gives you a little bit more real-time feel for where service trucks are at any given time during the day. And towing streets, refuse, workers' comp, fuel increases, and other salary adjustments within those divisions would be $500,000. Health department, other than that supportive reentry program we had. We still do that, cops and clinicians. That ended up being a contract as opposed to personnel, which was actually less than what was budgeted this fiscal year of about $300,000. In the Board of Public Service, we had a funded deputy position, the President's Office of about $100,000. There are also in the President's Office, you'll see some positions, and this is not really a budget increase or decrease. It was just more of how they handle it. Funds that are charged to other service funds. We used to use a fund 1116, which was a special sort of a holding fund for those positions. We felt it was cleaner to just budget all those positions in 1010 and charge those positions directly to whatever project they would be working on, whether it be a federal grant or let's say a bond fund project, or for instance, let's say the convention center project, they could from the general fund itself charge to that fund. We see a net increase in utility costs, and then also the DNR loan. This was something, the energy efficiency loan for projects that would reduce our utility costs. That's the low cost loan with the state of Missouri, and that would is being paid from utility savings of those projects. Equipment Services Division, that's mostly fleet costs, repair costs. So if you add all that up, you'd end up about a $30 million increase, just under $30 million, which gives you a base budget of 511.4, or a preliminary gap of about 17 million. So what this proposal does is say, okay, we haven't returned to where we were pre-pandemic wise on terms of revenue. So we would use whatever revenue replacement funds from the American Rescue Plan Act of $17.3 million to provide the rest of the balance. And I should point out that and this was, I don't know, coincidentally or not coincidentally, it was pretty close to what some of those one-time balancing measures we used last year. So, and the thing about this is that if revenues exceed estimates, then you would not need to draw as much down. So it is an unusual situation where we've never really had that kind of safety net before, where you can use it if you need it, if not, you don't. So that's where we're at there. Next slide, it looks at general fund revenue outlook. As you can see from the estimated receipts, $511.5 million. The earnings tax, which is our largest source of revenue, it's almost $178 million. That's down estimated 5.6%. And the reason why that is tracking down, you have to remember that FY21 had that, which is now about $12.5 million worth of deferred receipts in earnings tax from FY20. So you have to take that off the base. So we'll be watching that to see whether or not earnings tax continue to grow or what that is. I should point out, with all of these revenues, there's a lot of dust that needs to be settled in terms of projections, because there are going to be some trends both with sales, for instance, sales and use tax. You're going to say, has the dynamics changed any, and in the underlying base. So we're going to be finding that out in the next fiscal year in terms of where our new base and new normal is regarding some of these revenues. Property tax receipts sold slightly ahead of this year's $66.7 million. There is, again, slightly ahead of this year's estimate, increase of 1.5%. Again, and I've got this final column which compares it to FY19, just for illustrative purposes. Sales tax of $47.9 million. Again, that's an 18% increase. I've got some, as I mentioned, this year it's over 20% decline, and we've got that built in as a recovery of sorts for the sales tax. So it wouldn't be fully back from FY19 levels, but it would be better than obviously this year. The payroll tax, 2.8% increase, $40.3 million. Similar trends to the earnings tax as well. The franchise utility tax is $45.4 million. That's been one of our actual, it wasn't on our particular radar screen, but it's fallen short this year by over $5 million. And it's, I would suspect that when you look at the details, you're seeing that while residential was either slightly up or lower, commercial was the one that was actually down significantly, which suggests that it's the office space and the commercial spaces that were hit hardest during the pandemic that had that reduction, that resulted in that reduction. And I've got a slight increase for next year, but it would still be down significantly from FY19. Intergovernmental receipts, that reflects a lot of the health insurance, payments from one of the bigger ones is from EMS transports and such. And we saw a big drop in that early in the fiscal year. It's slowly coming back. You can see it's down over 24% from FY19, but it has slowly come back. That was a result of the number of runs were down over 20% through the third quarter of the fiscal year. Licenses, the big question here is where GBL ends up. That's the graduated business license, which is a fixed fee. It's not a percentage, so it doesn't really grow. It's more of a flat revenue source. But we have seen we saw a decline last year. I did expect to see some carryover from the previous fiscal year because it was shut down in the spring. At least some of that payment was deferred, but we'll probably see a moderation in FY22. Departmental fees and fines, $56.9 million. That's actually slightly up from last year. And that's a mix of revenues. I can say that one of the positive things that we've seen with departmental fees and fines is that we haven't seen a decline in building permits, which is one of our larger. We've actually seen increases in building permits. So the growth in construction and in buildings and such has continued throughout the pandemic. So that's on a positive note that we haven't seen a decline. Where we've seen decline in departmental revenues would be things like city courts, which weren't in operations for a good part of the fiscal year, or when limited operations. And as I mentioned, some of the, like for instance, EMS runs and things like that. The other category, $23.1 million, that's a lot of the transfers from convention and tourism taxes and such. We'll see some recovery in that projected 13.8% increase, but we're still down over 30% from FY19. And of course, the ARPA, which is the Rescue Plan Act revenues of 17.3. And the earnings tax, as we talk about so often, is 35% of the general fund revenue. On the expenditure side, I'm not going to go too much in the details. I've already talked about this a lot. For instance, general government, much of that big increase there is from the information systems, 1.9 million for accounting licenses and such that are in that budget. The comptroller's office, 9.8 million, has some telecom audit as well as some insurance premium increases. The non-departmental, that's a big 31.3% increase. Again, that's the resumption of a lot of those debt payments that were offset on special funds last year. And just in general, a lot of these increases have to do with the health insurance distribution that had reduced last year's payments. The 11.1%, that's the court's payments on both the $360,000 for the electronic monitoring as well as the raise the age at juvenile. County office decline, again, that's the Board of Elections. The big increase you see here in Health and Human Services, that's some of the new initiatives, particularly, well, the particular one is the $1.3 million increase there in the supportive reentry program in the Department of Health, which is the majority of that increase there. I mentioned some of the special funds earlier and updated this slide. This is the local use tax fund. Through 11 months, it's up 14%. This revised estimate of $41.5 million. That's, again, over $5 million over the original estimate. FY22 estimate, $39.4 million. Plus, we're appropriating some of that excess revenue into the next fiscal year. And what are the allocations for affordable housing? As a result of some the amendments that were approved by the Board of E&A, Board of Estimate and Apportionment, that was about $5 million for the regular allocation plus an additional $1.5 million to total $6.5 million. Healthcare Trust Fund is budgeted at $5 million. And building demolition, its regular allocation would be $3 million. You remember last year we didn't fully allocate that because of the budget concerns. Well, this is budgeted, this is be a $2 million increase over that amount, but it's fully allocated at $3 million. And then the excess use tax, which is everything else, you can see itemized there. That's $30.7 million. Refuse, housing conservation, the building division. Police department, 15.8. That's that $4.4 million decrease, most of which I talked about earlier. The health division, 9.6 million, a $1.9 million increase, and human services, a $1.5 million, or $1.5 million, which is $1 million increase. And as well as the city council, which is a $500,000, And these three items being some of those new initiatives related to the police department's decrease of $4 million. In the economic development sales tax, as I mentioned earlier, the sales tax is one of our hardest hit revenues. It was down over 26% through the third quarter. It's revised at $15.7 million, which is a little over $500,000 below original estimates. And it's expected to be $18.5 million next year. And then we've got some appropriating balances. The transit, the portion for transit is by ordinance 60% of that revenue. And there's $1 million for the transit study update. I don't know, I'm not quite sure what the status of that study is. But that's $11.1 million of an allocation. At the end of the current fiscal year, there should be close to $40 million in that account. So that is something that's going to be obviously ultimately some discussion about where do you go with those funds in terms of addressing transit from those revenues. Neighborhood stabilization, a 10% allocation, plus they also had some fund balances there. These are mostly PDA and CDA funded in divisions, $4 million total. Workforce development efforts by Slate, and that's the St. Louis Agency and Area Training and Human Services, that's a $1.8 million. Public safety infrastructure of 10%. And some of those ongoing costs, 911 system costs, SEMA, which has a mass notification system of 100,000, 911 system was 400,000. BPS had some cameras with 350,000, but not all of this was allocated. So there's still $1 million that needs to be allocated. And I'm sure that's going to be one of the things talked about there was for design work for the a new 911 system, which would combine the dispatchers all in one place. And so I think that's probably in the works. But that also needs to be worked out a little bit more in detail. And then the final piece of the economic development sales tax, which was 10%, which goes to the capital fund, that's $1.8 million. Allocations from Prop P. This is there are two pieces to Prop P. If you recall, this was actually the half-cent sales tax for public safety. And then in addition to that, it also raised the use tax commensurate with the increase in the sales tax. And so there are two, the ordinances which allocate these funds allocate both pieces. The sales tax portion 18.5, the use tax portion of 4.6 for a $23.1 million total. And there are some balances and deficits that need to be made up. Like for instance, the police department, they get 66% of that, which is $12.2 million. But there was also, because the sales tax was falling short, they had a negative balance. So in total appropriation would be $11.5 million. Fire department actually had a beginning balance there. So their full amount of 28% is $5.2 million. And the circuit attorney is 6% at $1.1 million. So the total allocation for the sales tax piece is 17.8. In the use tax portion, you see 25% for after school and jobs. And that goes mostly to the director of public safety, which has the youth jobs initiative, as well as a cadet program at the police department of $1.1 million. The circuit attorney also gets 7.7% of the use tax as well. And they also had a beginning balance, and they pay for staff as well as their pay and contractual services of $600,000. Recreation division gets 25% of that, and they also had a beginning balance, which are appropriating for recreation positions for performance programs. It's about $1.5 million. Building demolition gets a piece of that as well. It's 17.3%. That's another $800,000 over and above the use tax allocation of $3 million. And then the social works mental health initiative of 25%, plus another $600,000 in their balance. That's for human services positions and contracts of $1.8 million. And all of this you can see in the line item detail budgets you have before you. Moving to the capital fund, the proposed capital fund budget is $30.1 million. It's an increase of $3.4 million or 12.7% over the previous fiscal year. And as I mentioned, the capital fund is comprised, over 75% of it is derived from sales taxes. So you had a significant decline this year because sales taxes are projected to recover somewhat in the coming year. We do see a restoration of some of those accounts that were cut last year. So the FY22 capital budget assumes the gradual recovery, and I'm sure you'll be pleased that the ward capital and rec capital are fully accounted, fully allocated, and you can see the pie chart there. Ward accounts at 8.1 million, rec accounts at $500,000. I should point out that one of the limiting factors in the capital budget is over half, or about 54% of it, is for existing debt service payments. So you see this existing citywide debt, the police department, and that's all for debt. And part of this parks and improvements is also debt service. So it does limit some of your discretionary ability when it comes to capital improvements. Some of the personnel totals by funds. General fund includes a decrease of 154 positions. That includes the decline of about 90 correctional positions, as well as some 98 vacant police officer positions, offset by smaller increases, like, for instance, the sheriff is up by 5, PDA is up by 6, BPS is up by 6 as well, due to that shift in positions from Fund 1116 I discussed earlier. Some of the special funds are up by 12. Again, most of that, the bigger increases would be some of the new initiatives. For instance, the supportive reentry program, that was 10 position increase that's being funded through the use tax. Grant funds were down by 14. 10 of those were in the police department grants, which are expiring. And the enterprise funds were down by 5. Airport's down by 4, and water is down by 1. And this is just a chart which puts that in historical perspective. We're still down by about 347 positions compared to FY12, or over 10 years ago. Pension costs. We are seeing a rise in pension costs next fiscal year. I actually got the details on this chart below, from $83.1 million estimated in this current fiscal year, $87.9 million. And as I mentioned, most of those, both of those increases, you saw the police department's contributions actually declined by $2.5 million from that 38.1 to 35.6. But you saw the FRS, which is the old frozen fire retirement system, increased by $2.1 million. And then our own ERS system, which is the employee retirement system, go up by actual $5.1 million. So that was a significant increase over this fiscal year. So we've seen this start to crawl back up, and it's something that we got obviously keep an eye on. And when we talk about pension reforms, we need to keep this an eye on the overall trend, which is in recent years has just slowly been creeping back up. Again, here's some more details related to the status and funded status of each of these funds. We've been managing close to 80% of funded status, although, as I mentioned, with some of that, we're slowly slipping below on some of these. Like, for instance, the employee retirement system, on an actuarial basis, it's 77.6 funded. So it's just under 80%, but the market basis is 73.8. What that tells you is that when you go to a smoothing method, is that we haven't recognized some losses yet. All things being equal, these two will sort of meld, and you'll get closer to this, closer to the lower valuation. But now we've seen, we did not see the significant declines in markets that we had feared through the pandemic. So this is yet to be determined, but it's something that we need to keep an eye on as we go forward. Fire retirement, as you can see, the frozen retirement system, the FRS, 93.4% funded, 90% on market basis. On FRP, which is the fire retirement plan, 73, it's very close on both either market or actuarial. And this is actually pretty a good status, given that that's only 8 years old. So that's made good progress with that system. Police retirement system, 81.4% on an actuarial basis, and slightly below 80% on the market basis. And again, it's about nearly 80%. So if you add up all these liabilities, it's still over half $500 million. It's a $502 million liability. This next slide addresses some of the, well, actually one of our positive developments over the last few years in trying to restore our unreserved general fund balances to where we need them to be. At the beginning of the current fiscal year, on a cash basis, we started at $51.7 million, which is 10.7% of the pandemic reduced budget. I say that pandemic reduced because 10% was sort of a target point milestone to reach. And of course, the budget was artificially low this year because we did some of those things that were necessary to keep it balanced. But even looking forward on FY22, we'd still be at about 10.1%, which is significant improvement over those intervening years since the last recession. Now, GFOI guidance for on a cash basis is 2 months of regular general fund operating expenditures. So in some, you would see this probably somewhere in the 80s, $80 million. But I think we've made significant progress here. And we did not anticipate drawing fund balance in the current fiscal year. And fortunately, going forward, given the Rescue Plan Acts, we don't anticipate that. So this is something that we can continue to improve upon as the years progress. And speaking of the American Rescue Plan Act, this is an exhibit that the Government Finance Officers Association put out recently regarding things to consider when we're allocating the Rescue Plan Act funds. And I was going to highlight some of the important points in these guiding principles, as they call it. First of all, is the temporary nature of these ARPA funds. Keep in mind that all of these funds are to be spent by the end of December 2024. So at that point, when you come out of the program expires, you want to make sure that your budget and everything and anything that you've spent these funds on doesn't leave you with an obligation going forward. In fact, one of the things that I also underlined on this third bullet is maintaining structural balance. So basically it's saying you don't want to obligate your budget towards something that you're going to have to maintain once the funds are gone. So, or conversely, what you would like to be able to do is to achieve a structural balance, perhaps identify those things which would result in a decrease in operating costs going forward. Now, the one example I can come up with off the top of my head would be, for instance, the LED light conversion. So, for instance, if we could ensure that whatever energy efficient lighting we can do from a capital standpoint we can do, and that reduces our utility costs long beyond when these funds are gone, that would be a plus. And so those are the kind of things that you need to look at. Matter of fact, GFOA suggests that investment in critical infrastructure is particularly well suited for the use of ARPA funds, simply because it's one of those things where you invest and you get results long after the money's gone. So those are the type of things they wanted to highlight. They also suggested partnering efforts, because there are funds going to other agencies that are not the city. And so as we look to maybe partnering up with Bi-State or some other agency which also has funds, trying to coordinate so that we get the biggest bang for the bucks. And then take time and careful consideration on how we use these funds. And this slide is just a recap. Basically, the total budget, $1,153,000,000. That's a 3.9% increase. General fund is a 6.2% increase at $511.5 million, which includes being supplemented with the $17.3 million in American Rescue Plan Act funds. The general fund budget includes the proposed closure of medium security institution with $1.4 million allocated for the contractual detainee housing, $1.8 million allocated for correctional investigation unit, and a supportive reentry program. The police department budget includes the full cost of the body camera program at approximately $2.7 million. And the police department also includes the elimination of 98 vacant positions, reduces the use tax subsidy by $4 million, provides additional $1.5 million to affordable housing, $1 million each to health and human services for a victim support unit and case management, and $500,000 for affirmative litigation unit in the law department. And then also one of the other major initiatives, information technology systems, new accounting and payroll system, $2 million for licensing related costs. Revenues to special funds and capital funds also assume gradual recovery. Ward and recreation capital accounts a full allocation. And while some of the ARPA funds here are utilized in the budget, the majority yet to be determined. And then of course, we're going to be, as I mentioned, we're going to be monitoring how this economic recovery continues and where the new norm is in terms of our revenue. So there's still a lot of uncertainty how that plays out. But I believe with the ARPA funds there, and this provides us with a unique opportunity to address some things for the long term. And I'll pause there and see if there are any questions at this point.
Thank you very much, Director Payne. Madam Clerk or Mr. Clerk, one of the things I'd like for you to do is to alert the other departments on our agenda where we are with time. We know that we won't meet the 10 o'clock starting time for the comptroller's office. So I'm going to designate, we have 10 members present. I'm going to give each member 3 minutes for questioning, and then we'll move on to get the other presentations in today. Please, committee members, remember, Paul Payne is available to us at all times throughout this budget process. He will be available each day as presentations are being made, because sometimes we need him to help when budgets are being explained. So understand that this is not a one-time opportunity to ask a question. You will be able to do that throughout this entire process. So let's start with our committee members. Alderman Boyd, would you like to go first, please?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Professor Paul Payne, for all the hard work that you do on this budget. I know it's not easy, and I always appreciate being able to call you anytime to get guidance and advice, you know, to better understand what's going on with city finances. I just want to be clear on the 90 jobs that will be lost at MSI. Are those real jobs where people will actually be laid off, or those just positions that won't be filled?
Those are positions that were vacant that are being moved over to or Justice. So all those, the number of vacancies at CJC exceeded the number of filled positions at MSI. So those were reflective movement. Now there may be some adjustments if they say, okay, we don't need this supportive person in this category. We need to work among our TO or personnel schedule to find a better position. But everyone that was filled is budgeted over in that just one cost.
Okay. On the economic development monies, you said 1.8 million was for city infrastructure, right?
Right.
And is that money basically part of that overall capital budget that we do, you know, citywide infrastructure improvements?
Yes.
Okay. And you still have that capital committee?
Yes.
Okay. Would you be able to send the committee all the capital projects that are in the queue to be funded this next fiscal year?
Sure. Actually, as I mentioned, most of the, if you look at the capital budget,
okay,
most of the, at least the citywide, which is what the capital always discusses, most of that's debt service. So your sort of hands are tied. You do have like $500,000 for building improvements, and that, if you talk to DPS, they would tell you that doesn't cover the scratch the surface, but some of those items there. I'll send you that page there. Of course, most of the discretionary capital is in the ward account, so that's the $8 million there. But yeah. We can send you, actually in the exhibits themselves, that sort of lays out what, to the extent that it is available for discretionary projects, that will be laid out. Otherwise, there are some portions of funds, for instance, the neighborhood parks pieces, which are yet to be determined by the Parks Committee. And I think there's a couple of those. But yeah, I can send you the exhibit. I mean, although you do have them, but I'll highlight them and send them to you.
Okay, Paul, I know people like to say that the ward capital is discretionary money that the aldermen get allocated, and it kind of is. But at the end of the day, when we look at citywide infrastructure improvements like resurfacing Union Boulevard from from Lindo all the way to West Florissant. We can't do that with a quote unquote discretionary city capital. So I'm really interested in us being able to really take care of those major roads that run through our wards without asking aldermen to dedicate, some of their ward capital, because a typical street could easily cost you anywhere from $10,000 or $40,000 to pave, depending on if it's single, double, or triple block street. So I'm real interested in resurfacing some of these roads that we have, and I do appreciate the job that the city has done with patching Union so far. The other question, and I'm not going to take up much time, I only have 3 minutes. How will we deal with the police overtime? Because it's a misnomer to think that we're going to cut out positions that we haven't filled and not expect to have more overtime increases, because what we've been able to do is pay for more overtime by using some of the funds that we had left over by not hiring or not being able to hire. So how will we deal with the police overtime?
Yeah, I'm sort of clear on that when that was addressed earlier at the Board of E&A meeting. I'm going to share this. I did do some addenda slides just so that you have this. And I'll I don't believe you have a PDF of this. Madam Chairwoman, I'll make sure you have all this. It'll be posted as well, but just so you've got it. This is an illustration I brought up at the Board of E&A, actually on the overtime history, budget versus actual. And then and also I pulled a number of officers filled over the years from the police pension reports, because oftentimes you get different numbers depending on what time of year you're looking at. And I was saying, what's a consistent source? Well, the pension report does a snapshot every year at October 1st when they do their actuarial evaluation. So, well, that's a pretty consistent source. So why don't I use that one? So that just shows you what the uniform strength has been over that last 20 years. But to go directly to your question, you're right in that they have been, except for the big year in which we overspent overtime to almost $10 million in FY17. You've been overspending overtime about $3 or $4 million per year. And what they've been doing is that, given that they can't fill all their uniform positions, they've been using those unfunded positions as a way of funding the overtime expenditures. So with the elimination of the 98 positions, you don't have that flexibility anymore. So you cannot just spend overtime like it was done previously. I mean, that's just management decision. So it's not going to be.
Well, I won't be on record to say that we're going to overspend on police overtime. It's just going to happen. And then what's going to happen is other departments going to be shortchanged because we don't have a choice. If we want to make sure that our neighborhoods are safe, we're going to be forced to pay overtime because it's going to be necessary. So I just want to be on record of saying that I have a grave concern about public safety and the police in our streets with not being able to hire the additional police officers and extending our budget in the line item of overtime for police officers. It's going to happen. Mark my word. I've been here long enough to know that it will happen, just like it happens with the fire department. Thank you, Paul.
Sure.
Alderman Vaccaro.
Paul, a couple things, but I'm also with Alderman Boyd. They cut the overtime budget. I saw that when I was reading how much, and then I saw other cuts in the police department. What is the total cut to the budget of the police department? The way I see it, it's in the millions, but maybe I'm misreading it. But what is the total overall cut being made to the police department in dollars?
Well, the cut that we were referencing was the $4 million. Was the $4 million reduction as a result of the position?
Well, no, I'm talking about they cut overtime, they cut other things. What I saw what they asked for and what they're getting. What is the total cut to the police department?
Yep. Right. Let me Actually, one of the summaries you have in your line item detail book, and that's where I'm going right now, is a summary by cost center in the department.
And I did that, and I looked at it. And
Yeah,
to me,
and if
it
you look
looked
at-
like a lot, like in the, like close to what, 50 million or so? I mean, it looks like a lot to me, and maybe I'm misreading it.
No, the actual budget is actually slightly higher. Let me see if you take out, and I'm looking at S17, which is the summary. Let me stop sharing this here. S17, which is the summary page, and it's a budget summary by department and fund. And so if you look under 650 police department, now one of the major changes, I think what you might be looking at is, and I may have failed to mention this, is that there are units within the police department that have been broken out that weren't broken out before. And those units include budget and finance, supply and uniform, internal affairs, the force investigation unit, information technology, the big one being patrol, 911 dispatch, and prisoner processing. Do you see what page I'm looking at of the line item detail? It's page S17. And so it breaks all that out, and you can see the bottom line, FY21, FY22. It's slightly higher, about 178 to 180, or 177.7 to 180. Of course, that includes grants and such, but that's where the detail is.
Yeah, see, the way I see it, it seems like there's a lot more money being cut from the police budget. And I will be with Alderman Boyd going on record and saying this is going to be, I wasn't no part of it, and it's going to backfire in a big way. We're either not going to have the police on the street like we need. I mean, you just can't take away all that. You can't take away, bring the overtime down to 2 million. But I'm just going to be with, I'll keep it at that, and then I'll bring this up later again. The other thing, why are we not allowing, each year we keep taking away for the last, I don't know, tons of years, the testing for the firefighters. Again, this year, the testing isn't in the budget. I get calls from different firefighters that say, there's the testing once again is taken out of their budget. Why are we not allowing them? How many years have gone by, and then if we don't do it, I mean, I'm hearing. I don't even remember testing being in there almost since I've been here, which is 12 years.
Yeah, I'll have to defer to the Department of Personnel on that, but the funds were budgeted this year, so I don't know what the status is of that, whether that's going to be encumbered or whether that's.
So is it budgeted?
This current fiscal year, there were funds budgeted, yes.
And they didn't use them.
Yeah, that the last time I was aware of it, they had not spent it. But
and that's not going to roll over to next year.
It would depend. If there's an existing contract out there, then you would encumber that amount and carry that forward. But if there's no contract, then you would not.
Right, and there is no contract.
Yeah, I can't speak to.
And then there's no money this year being put in to try to get testing done again.
Alderman Vaccaro, may I interrupt for
Yes.
just a second?
Yeah.
That's a very interesting topic. And when the fire department is before us, let's dive into that deeper, okay?
No, I have no problem with that, but they're the ones asking the same question to me.
But we need to get the clear understanding from them. And when personnel comes before us, that's another place we can get more clarity.
Okay, well, I can tell you that in personnel, they did not put a contract together. I mean, I've researched it. I mean, I'm asking questions that I basically know the answers to,
Okay.
you know.
We all want to get it out. We want to get it out to the public directly from each one of them.
Right. Well, okay. And what I'm saying is there's no contract and there's no money in this next year's budget for testing. And the police department, the cuts to the budget go way beyond the $4 million on the officers, cutting overtime down to 2 million. And I'm going to stop at that, but I will go on record as saying not only do I oppose this, it's going to be a major problem because, with the amount of crime going up the way it has, and the murders going up, and in neighborhoods that have the increase in crime, to do this, it's a sin. It's just not right. And I'm just going on record as saying I think this is going to be a disaster. But I am washing my hands of the disaster. So when all the cards start falling, I'll be with Alderman Boyd and saying, we told you so. So I'm done with that. I'll jump off at that.
Thank you very much, sir. Alderwoman Howard.
I am along with Alderman Boyd and his concern for the budget for public safety via the police. I have no questions at this time. I will save those for when we have those people before us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Alderwoman Boyd. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just looking here. Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Director Payne, or Budget Director Paul Payne, for being here today. This was a pretty comprehensive summary of where we're at. If you don't mind, as you mentioned, the presentation has changed since you presented it to the Board of VNA, and that's what's available, I think, on the budget website. Could you provide the committee with a copy of this presentation so that we can have it? And as it moves forward, as we make changes, this is something I mentioned in the last hearing. It would just be nice to have these documents available. I like to take notes and kind of follow along. It's hard to do that when we don't have a copy of the presentation or the information that we're looking at.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and moving forward, as this thing changes and as it goes back and forth, it would be helpful just to keep the committee here informed and have those materials available to us and the public as we kind of move through this. My questions, I have a couple, and I'll just get them out of the way really quickly, recognizing that the chair wanted to keep our questions short. So particularly with regards to the use tax, there's a significant increase in the presentation of about $5 million. I'd like to, I know there's probably a simple explanation for it, and perhaps I missed it in your presentation, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. The earnings tax in a general sense appears to be going down. Looking back to fiscal year 19, we had a earnings tax of 185 million. This year's projected at 178 million. I'd like your thoughts on what is really driving that slow but apparently steady reduction in that very significant and important source of revenue. If that's a reduction in people working in the city of St. Louis, if that's a reflection of the population reduction that we are seeing coming out of the census, what's really driving that and what should we be alarmed about it? And anecdotally, or maybe a smaller issue, would be that GPS monitoring for the streets department. I'm curious if we have other departments that are deploying that sort of GPS monitoring of our assets and where our city employees are at any given time. So, for example, refuse or other departments that we're consistently getting questions about, activities and services, street cleanings, that sort of thing, if we're actively monitoring those other departments.
The question on the use tax, as I mentioned when we were going through the revenue slides, is that what we've seen is that when the economy shut down last spring, we saw an immediate drop in both hotel, restaurant, and sales taxes. But then we saw, and I'm going to pull this slide back up again, this sudden surge in the use tax. Let's see. And you can see what happened. Basically, here we are. We had been seeing increases as the likes of Amazon and Wayfair and all those entities had started paying, even on a voluntary basis.
Excuse me, Paul, you're not showing we see your home screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me.
It's a very nice image.
Yeah, I took that picture, by the way.
Wow.
Very nice.
Let me stop share and share again.
Oh, so we had a surge in the use tax, you were saying, and
Yeah.
presumably that's based on, is it?
Here we go. All right, there we go. So you can see this May and June receipts. And you basically were hovering around $3 million, and actually there's a lot of volatility with the use tax. Originally, it was driven by business payments, but over time, it's been more commercial. And you can see that in May and June, what was going on in May and June? Well, basically everyone was locked up at home. And so, or again, there's a lag here. This would be maybe March and April. And so you saw this big surge. But now you look fast forward a year and what happens? So basically here we've got our first indication. Here's May. Well, May of 2021 is not May of 2020. It's May of 2019. It looks like it had drawn back more to what you would expect from the use tax as opposed to these increases. So it's going to be interesting. And again, you also have the state just passed legislation on the Wayfair legislation to increase the pool of those who are required to pay. Now, a few years ago, that would have been a significant increase. I think we've seen a lot of that increase already. As I mentioned, Amazon has already been paying, Wayfair has already been paying, and you've got others that are already paying. Though, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be some drive for an increase in the base. But at the meantime, you're going to have this counter trend where it's perhaps reverting back to normal. And hopefully what you're going to, or possibly what you're going to be seeing is as the sales tax goes up, the use tax is sort of moderates. But has there been any permanent change? And that's yet to be seen, whether we have a new normal for local use tax and a new normal for sales tax. You still need some more actual experience in that before you get there. And so that's what you just see in the news.
Okay, but the $5 million increase is just, we're projecting that based on these surges or the commercial activity, or?
Based that it's exceeding what we had estimated. I mean, it had a 5% decline, and actually you're up 14.1% year to date. Based on that, you're tracking higher than your estimate. So our estimate. So that's what that is.
Okay, and so the earnings tax in a general sense, that's sort of, if we discount 2020, if we look back to 2019, I'm just seeing, we would expect that to be going up with inflation and other, and we want to see increased activity. What's driving the steady decrease in our earnings tax?
Yeah, well, actually, I'd be careful about saying it's a decrease because we're projecting forward, so we don't have actual numbers. And as I mentioned this year, is that we're outperforming this year. So what does that tell us? Well, that means that we had a decline, which was significant. It was 4% in the withholdings, but it wasn't 15%, which is what we had been being on the safe side budgeting. So we're exceeding that. Now, how much of a earnings tax is going to be interesting going forward because you don't know whether the universe has changed in. Right? So in the short term, if everyone just comes back downtown and they're working as they did before, we're back to where we were and everything's back to normal. However, if the trend for the longer term trend ends up being that you no longer work at a place of business, and that's a permanent thing, that may impact going forward. It's just too early to tell. So in projecting for revenues next fiscal year, I mean, it's still in that uncertainty phase. You could very well exceed that dollar. You could very well exceed that amount, but we need to see that in the actual numbers, and we just don't have the actual numbers yet. And complicating this a little bit further, the IRS extended last month's date to this month. So the data, again, has been disturbed a bit. So it's going to take a while for this dust to settle to get a good sense of it.
Okay. Yeah. And, recognizing the abnormalities of the last year, might be helpful to take a look at some of these trends, over 5-10 years, just to see if, we are seeing, we should be expecting, if we should be expecting 200 million in earnings tax by now, and we're not realizing that. These are things we should be being aware of. And you mentioned downtown. This is one of my chief concerns. If folks aren't going back downtown, not just because of pandemic, because of public safety or other issues or development issues, we need to be aware of them so that we can not only, address them, but, be aware of not just be aware of, our budget projections, but, try to address some of the issues, some of the underlying issues that are in our control, to better position our city for growth. Lastly, the monitoring, the GPS, are we monitoring some of the other assets that we have as a city besides just the street department?
I'm not familiar with all of them. I was aware of this one that they were talking about in streets, because I remember a number of years ago when they talked about it, it was a budgetary concern where they said, it was cheaper to do the download at the end of the day versus live. But I am not aware of what other operating departments have them. I'd have to defer to the departments.
And that's a question I can ask to the administration. So but I appreciate you going through that. That's all I have, Madam Chair. Thank you, Paul, for being here today.
Okay, thank you very much. Alderman Collins Muhammad.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the interest of time, I will reserve any questions or comments for the director. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alderman Oldenburg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any questions at the moment. That I'm going to probably follow up separately with the budget director and then get back to the committee. I know we've got a pretty stacked up agenda, so I'll make a list and get back to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alderwoman Navarro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a couple of big picture questions for you, Paul. One, we did mention, or you mentioned Wayfair. What do you think, since that did pass in Jefferson City, is that calculated into here at all, or what do you anticipate? I don't know when that goes into effect, when we'll be able to start collecting more, and what that would do to our revenues.
Well, as most state statutes go into effect the end of August or so, I believe, and then of course there's a lag time between when you would have that official date, and I suspect it's going to be a little bit more lagging than usual, simply because these entities, if they haven't been paying already, which a lot of them have, because we're probably the last, if not the last state to do this. So a lot of them have already been paying simply because they program their systems to do it, and so I think that's what was the case with Wayfair, because we started seeing that last year, and this was before the legislation. I did not anticipate that to say, hey, we're going to expect this big boom in use tax this coming fiscal year, simply because it'd be a partial year, and I expected to see lag. But we did appropriate the excess funds that were received this year, next year. So I think you should see an increase in the base ultimately, probably less than what we had anticipated a number of years ago, simply because we have already seen that in the base. It's one of those where let's see what the actual result is, and that's a little bit knowable, and that may take some time. It'll probably be a year from now before you actually get a good sense for, okay, what's our base impact on this.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And then again, so big picture, and I don't know if you've got slide 6 handy, but looking at that, it looks like our budget overall is going up 3.9%, and it looks like we have experienced a $44 million shortfall over our 2019 budget. Are those two numbers right? Do I have those?
Yes.
Okay. And how does this compare to other cities similar to ours? How are they doing?
I haven't actually compared it to other cities specifically. It's funny because at this time last year, I was reaching out to other cities and there was no playbook. I mean, everyone was doing something differently, and with total understanding, because no one knew where this thing was going. And then some departments kick the can down the road and wait. Some departments utilize fund balance. So I'm actually glad where we ended up, because we actually took the bull by the horns and we didn't rely on fund balance to do it. So that was a good thing. Now, in terms of the recovery, I've been looking like our neighbor across the state in Kansas City to see what they're looking at in terms of revenues and all. I mean, there's comparabilities there, but every city is going to be different. I should point out again that when we start talking about the ARPA funds, the method for calculating what the loss is pretty well specified in that, and that'll look at FY19, which is your first full fiscal year prior to the pandemic, and then provide you with a 4.1% inflator, which is greater than our normal growth. So the loss is, as computed in that way, is pretty generous, and so it will be a larger amount than what you see here. But that will just give you the flexibility to say, okay, this under the ARPA Act is a loss, and so you can treat the revenues as revenue replacement, which gives you more broader discretion over how to use those funds.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I do appreciate last year, I think your projections of worst case scenario and even worst case scenario have served us well. So thank you for that. And just one last question. I've kind of, been jumping ahead in the budget book, looking at the different departments, and there are many cases where what was budgeted is above what was requested. And I'm just curious in general, how often that happens, or I guess why that happens.
Okay. In general, we get the requests in February of each year. So sometimes there may be, particularly if it's a new initiative of some sort that occurs, let's say the administration has one and all, we add that to the budget. It's not something that was formally requested by the department or per se, it was just added after. There are also adjustments to fringe benefit rates and such. If you particularly look at the line item, for instance, the pension increase. We estimate in December what our pension contribution would be. We get the actual rate in at the end of March. So that actual rate was actually higher this year. So you'll see that all things being equal, the pension amount budgeted in each department is higher than we requested, simply because of it. Same thing, health insurance usually does that too. And those are the kind of things that you'll see occasionally where we don't typically adjust the request after we received it. It's just something after that.
Okay, so it's more of a timing issue of when the request came in and when the actual need was, developed. Okay, great. Thank you. That's all I have right now. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Middlebrook.
I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Evans.
Madam Chair, in lieu of the time schedule, I will hold my other questions, but I do want to say that I also have concerns about the reduction in the police's budget, and I stand with Alderman Boyd and Alderwoman Howard with those concerns.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to try to be somewhat courteous, and I do know that we have other alderpersons that are online here, and I saw Alderwoman Ingracia. Do you have any questions of immediacy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do not.
Thank you very much. Alderman Page.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm listening and learning. I have no questions at this time.
Thank you. I didn't see anybody else click on. And I told you all, my peripheral going back and forth here is not the best. So is there any other alderperson that I missed? I don't think so.
Madam Chair, there are a couple of us, but
Oh,
I don't
there
have
you are.
questions. Thank you.
I saw you, but I thought you got off.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Go right ahead, Alderwoman Rice.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying I have no questions. Thank you.
No questions? Okay. Anyone else, please chime in. Okay, hearing none. I'm very glad to have this opportunity. As usual, Director Payne, you're very thorough, and committee members, please know that he's always available to us, and he will be a part of these hearings every day, and we can make sure that he will get back to us as soon as possible to answer your questions and or provide information. I'd like to move on now to our next presentation, and I will first apologize that we are running over, but I anticipate that throughout this whole exercise. So, Madam Comptroller.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. It's always a pleasure to see you, and most especially hear your wisdom, as you have been the steward for many years and you've taken good care of the city. So please move forward with your presentation.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Honorable board members, honorable committee members of Ways and Means, thank you this morning. We have a budget presentation today that will be very brief, similar to the past years. The Comptroller's Office is presenting a budget that's very austere, very thoughtful and mindful of the city's budget and shortfall in revenues and so forth and so on. You each should have a summary provided for you, giving you the total of the budget for the Comptroller this year is once again 11.5 million in fiscal 22, as it is compared to 10.7 in fiscal 21, which is the pandemic year. You'll notice that there's very small changes from the pandemic year when our budget was down from 11 million down to 10.7 million, and we're up slightly at fiscal 22 with 11.5. Generally speaking, we work very closely with the budget director as we put together our budget. We, of course, are hit with increased health insurance. We have increased costs in long distance. We've added one full-time FTE for the neighborhood stabilization bonds for support. We have added the merit increase that's across the board and for payroll. And generally speaking, we have kept to just any small increases that was needed throughout, if necessary, that is, throughout. Otherwise, the reductions have been taken where we could have taken reductions. And again, I'll stress that we're very mindful of the budget for the overall city as we prepared our budget to have the understanding that we would cut where we needed to cut and just add sparingly in those areas where we needed to add. Madam Chair, that is my presentation. I have my deputy controllers available along with several staff members for the Honorable Board to answer any questions that you may have for us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Comptroller, so I will allow you to determine whether or not you have specific presentations that you would like to have made by any of your staff.
I have not prepared anything specifically from my staff in addition. However, we stand ready to respond to any of your questions.
Thank you very much. We'll start with our committee members. Alderman Boyd.
I want to pass right now, Madam Chair. Please come back.
All right, thank you. Alderman Vaccaro.
Yeah, I have no real questions. I'm going to listen for now.
All right, thank you. Alderwoman Howard.
I have no questions, but thank you for joining us today, Comptroller Green. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Madam Comptroller, for being with us today. So it looks
Thank
like it looks like more or less the comptroller's budget of around $7 million increased a little bit. What you were mentioning that health insurance and other things. What were the drivers of the increase? Is that pretty much?
Yes. The drivers of the increases, as I expressed, were literally the reduction that we took for our fiscal 22 budget, not fiscal 22, excuse me, it's the fiscal 21, took us down from 11 million, which we had in fiscal 20, to 10.7. So that's part of where we are when we talk about what it is that we're budgeting for fiscal 22. Fiscal 22 is a slight increase, which does include the health insurance increase. It also includes the payroll 3% merit increase. We have increased costs when it comes to the long distance. We have a full-time FTE for the neighborhood stabilization GO bond, and there may be other slight cost increases that may be expressed by my staff. If Bev, which is here, if there's anything that I've left out.
So is that actually telephone long distance?
Pardon me? Yes. Citywide. The comptroller's office carries these costs for long distance and line charges and other telecommunications costs citywide.
Okay. Is it? I just am so surprised to see 80,000. I mean, I just do we have an option of doing cellular, or are there other? It just seems like
we have a telecommunications study also budgeted this year so that we can get after those costs that are continuously going up. We have been in consultation with the budget director, Paul Payne, who's urged our office to take some steps in the telecommunication area to see if we can reduce the cost. So we do have a study. And we think that we can, within the next several months, reduce costs in telecommunications. That's our goal, is to reduce that cost. And you're right on point to point out that there are new options that are out there for us. And so we're going to get after that.
That's excellent. Excellent to hear. The only real line item that looks like there's a real significant change, or one that's unaccounted for, is the professional services, additional 125,000.
Absolutely, and that's that telecommunications study that we are expressing right now, where we're going to get after that long distance costs and other telecommunications costs that have been consistently increasing. We've got a telecommunications study, a contract that goes over 2 years, 125,000 each year. And you're absolutely correct pointing out that the first year of that contract is the 125,000. Actually, this is the second year because we've started. And so we're covering the first part of it with those funds that have been encumbered, as well as those that are available in this year's budget. So for over a course of 2 years, which would include this fiscal year 22, which is what you're looking at, we have a $125,000 cost for the telecommunications study. That's your increase. That's the reason for the increase.
So then the study for the telecommunications is a 2-year study that will total $250,000 to take
Correct.
And that's to reduce the $80,000 annual cost of long distance?
The increase is including the long distance as well as other telecommunications costs across the board. And we're looking to reduce costs across the board, which would definitely include the $80,000 increase in addition to other increases across the board. Of course, we don't know what the total amount, but we believe they would be far and above $250,000.
That makes sense. Thank you, Madam Comptroller. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Alderman Collins Muhammad.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Comptroller, I have no questions, but if you can direct a member of your staff to reach out to me, just a personal matter regarding a business in my ward. That's all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Oldenburg.
I have nothing at the moment, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Navarro.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I do have a couple of questions, and thank you, Comptroller Green. And I want to make sure that I'm looking at the handout that was sent, and I'm trying to reconcile those numbers with the numbers that we have in our budget book. So if you don't mind just being patient with me and kind of walking through this, and if it's more appropriate for Paul to jump in, let me know. But I'm looking at, so the budget here, the total is 11.5 million. And when I'm looking at our line item for the comptroller, I see a total of about 7.5 million, and I'm looking at page 54, which is that first one, looks like from the general fund, 160, and then there's the municipal garage, and then the 163 records retention, and then it looks like there's a request. So these other additional funds would come from these special funds, and all of that adds up to 11.5 million. How do I follow that in the budget book? Because I'm not seeing where those numbers.
Okay, thank you for asking that question. We provided you with a summary that gives you the total of the comptroller's office. I have Beverly Fitzsimmons who can, if she doesn't mind, adding to you to help you understand the addition. The Gateway Transportation Center, along with the TIF, the Lateral Sewer Fund, and other grants do come under the purview of the comptroller's office. Bev, do you mind helping?
No problem. No problem at all. I'm not sure which book you're looking at, but if you're looking at not the line item detail, but the actual board bill, the Gateway Transportation Center is under Fund 1116. So the board bill takes you through by fund. Okay, so that is under Fund 1116.
I'm sorry, and Bev, what page is that? I was looking at the line item detail, but I'll switch to the board bill if you can tell me what page we're on.
You're looking at the line item or the board bill?
Well, I had the line item open, but if you're looking at the board bill, I will switch to that one. I just need a page number.
Let's see, it is the board bill, it's 114 is the Gateway Transportation Center. And I'd like to note the majority of the funding for the Gateway Transportation Center is paid by Amtrak and Greyhound, that type of thing. So your funding source, they fund the operational costs. The city has a small portion of that.
Okay, and so that's, okay, and so I'm seeing a department total there. So mine says Fund 1116 Information Technology Services Agency.
On
page 114 of the board bill.
I have the board bill that was given to ENA, so possibly that might have changed. Maybe I'm looking at a different one. But if you follow 1116 through, the department numbers go up by number. If you're looking at information technology, go 2 more pages.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, I see it. Okay, and so that number is about 1.7 million. Okay, and so I see that lines up there. Okay.
Okay.
Got
Your
it.
tax increment financing is the admin portion of the staff that we have with tax increment financing to maintain that. On mine, it's 224, so somewhere around there.
Okay.
I'm assuming maybe 226 or so. I apologize, I don't have an updated one.
Yes, page 226, found it.
Okay. The lateral is, go back to 1118. That is just simply an admin cost that a portion of a person, helps identify authorized properties and things like that. And that's somewhere around 150, I believe. That's a very small piece. And then grants and other funds, we have a federal grants section in the office, and a portion of their salary is charged to the admin portion of the grant. So like CDA pays, say, $40,000 towards a person's salary, and we have some with health and human services and things like that. Okay, so that's basically your grants and other funds kind of total together for that. Okay.
Great, thank you. That is a huge help. I appreciate that. And then for the, I'm looking at the comptroller's office summary, and then there's the box down about staffing. And so that's essentially saying of that 11.5 million, is it, okay, so that's funding 98. That includes funding 98 full-time positions, an increase of 2 from last year.
Right.
Okay. And one of those is the FTE that Comptroller Green was talking about, was it neighborhood stabilization?
Correct. That is that's funded. It is a current employee funded through that, but it could also be the 2 increases are numbers that are put in to allow open opportunities in the office.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. I don't have any questions. That was very helpful. Thanks for walking me through that. I appreciate your patience.
Thank you very much. Alderwoman Middlebrook.
I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Alderwoman Evans.
I have no questions at this time, except for one little question. And that is, Honorable Comptroller Darling Green, under grants and funds, will there be home repair programs that our constituents can take advantage of or utilize from this budget?
Alderwoman, we have not developed any of the programs through our office, and I cannot say whether or not you would find any of the funding through our office as we go forward. So that's a great question, and I'm glad to hear that you support home repair programs, as I also support home repair programs. But I think there's going to be an announcement as to where those funds will be recorded, and that way you'll know which programs are where and how you can get to those as we move this budget process forward. Part of what you guys are doing here today and this week through your review is going to help us decide where best that those funds should be. Partly, through some of the capital, I would imagine, and possibly through some of the relief funding, as you're most likely alluding to. So yes, that's a great question, but I wouldn't believe that would be in my budget at this time.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Honorable Comptroller Darlene Green.
All right.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Rice.
No questions at this time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Alderman Page.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Comptroller Green. I have no questions at this time. Thanks again.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to Alderman Boyd because I thought you referenced you would have a question later.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Comptroller, for all your service to the city. I'm a little confused and I don't have my book with me. How much are we spending on telephone services or telecommunication, long distance? How much money are we spending on long distance phone calls annually?
Beverly, can you help with that, please? The total cost of, I know we have the line item detail and we have several lines dedicated to citywide costs for telecommunications. Much of it is in 1010, 160.
Right. The long distance has an $80,000 budget for this year. Overall, it looks like the telephone that is in our budget right now runs about $1.3 million, maybe. That just quick adding in my head. So that includes everything from 911 service to long distance to line charges. So that's what that is.
Okay, but specifically to long distance, is it broken out? How much do we pay in long distance calls?
Well, the line item that identifies long distance says 80,000.
Okay, and is it just because the city is like a business that businesses pay for long distance calls? Because I didn't know anybody was paying for long distance calls. You know, most home residential phones, it just comes with your service.
I do not know the answer to that. I don't know.
That's real odd to me.
And I'm glad you're bringing that up, Alderman. That is a problem area for the city. There's some irregularities there, and we hope to root out those irregularities as well as get after those additional costs. These are some these charges are based on some very old contracts. And then there are some new procedures that our carrier AT&T put in place to contract on, I would say, a la carte services to the city, which long distance would be separated out differently than I guess what you're alluding to. So we need to get after that and see if we can't be treated a little better in terms of how they charge us. But we are tied, as I understand, to an older contract that we signed up for, and there's some irregularities associated with that.
Okay. And since I have you, Madam Comptroller, and you're a member of ENA, I just want to ask you this question because I don't have a lot of questions about your budget. I think your office runs very efficiently, but I'm really disappointed, you know, with the direction of public safety in our budget. And are you pretty confident that $2 million in overtime and cutting 98 police officers is a good management tool to use in this budget? Because I'm scared that we're going to exceed the.
Thank you for that question. As I recommended in last year's budget to reduce overtime with 2 million, and we, by 2 million, and we survived. So this year's budget, again, the new administration has recommended or repeated the recommendation to reduce overtime by 2 million. And as you just stated, in addition, they have also looked at the number of open, unfilled positions that have been funded and decided to no longer fund those positions in this year's budget and to instead fund alternative public safety prevention methods to help fight violent crime and to reduce crime overall in our city with some transformative changes that we in the last several years have not taken advantage of. So with regard to an unfilled position, it is my position to say that that position would never fight crime because it's unfilled. There is no person, there's no one there to walk the beat. And so from my experience in my office as comptroller, and in addition to my experience as the former budget director, I understand that the city of St. Louis several years ago, late 90s, early 2000s, had a total manned police of 1,600 officers total. That was reduced to 1,400 in the late 90s, early 2000s. That number has carried forward as the total officer number and has not been met, even though those positions had been funded. And then the department started funding less than the 1,400 to what you see now is 1,300 plus funded. But total field very much has stayed in the 1,100-1,200 area total field. There will be a graduating class this year of 48 officers. I'm told that this budget can sustain, and we are reaching out. There is a continuous outreach for more officers. But what we know is that between now and the next year, that we will not have a funding problem for where we are as we're budgeting now. In other words, we're catching up with where we are in reality, as opposed to having money set aside for officers' bodies, the bodies of officers filling positions. So what we're doing instead is the transformative change that we need to fight crime. And so to answer your question, I'm all in because I understand the numbers, not only when it comes to those that are unfilled positions, but I understand how many years that the city has studied this. We have a new interim public safety director that is studying this very question that you're asking me now, very well familiar because he was a former chief of police with what you're asking, and will be able to give you a better answer than I'm giving you. But since I've been here with the former police chiefs, and I think I've served in my position, and there's been 5, I do know that each of them have a very hard time of filling those unfilled positions. But our new administration says, let's take a next step, and that is to remove the positions, use the money that we have for those processes that can help reduce violent crime. That's in a different manner than unfilled positions.
Okay,
so that's so to ask if we're taking police off the street, we're absolutely not doing that. We're wanting to. I got you on that. I agree with you, but you ask about the unfilled positions.
No,
and unfilled means that there's not a position filled.
Okay.
There's no person in the position, correct?
Let me ask it this way, Madam Comptroller. Are you confident that the $2 million that's allocated for the police overtime is adequate, and that they will not exceed $2 million in overtime in order to keep our streets safe?
Based on last year's budget, and based on the fact that we reduced overtime by $2 million last year, and based on the experience, in other words, we got everything done that we needed to get done last year, then I can say that we're in the right place this year with the same reduction.
Okay, thank you, Madam Comptroller. Appreciate your time. No further questions.
Thank you very much. Madam Comptroller, I'd like to thank you and your staff for making your presentation today. And if by chance we have additional questions, they will be sent to you. And hopefully we can make sure that our budget is adequate and we move forward. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks.
Thank you, honorable board members.
Thank you.
I'd like to move on now to our next presentation. We are very much, I can't believe it, we got back on time. So it appears that almost everybody is online. I'm going to give it a couple of more minutes. And right now, if there are any other alderman persons that just recently joined online, please put your name in the chat if you are interested in asking questions. I don't want to miss anybody. And sometimes I'm busy reading or doing something else and I might miss you. So if you're interested and you're not on the committee and you need to ask a question during a presentation, I want to get you on that list. And so also, I wanted to ask that all the information that has been requested of our director, Paul Payne, please make sure that those copies are also sent to our board clerk. That's very critical that they have a complete documentation of these hearings. Okay. Now we're ready to bring before us our mayor for a presentation from the mayor's office. And if Madam Mayor is available now, we can welcome our Mayor Tashara Jones. And we'll give our mayor the next 2 minutes because we were scheduled for 11 and it's only 10:58. Are there any questions that need to be asked for information of Paul Payne now that you've thought about it for a moment and you've heard some other questions and comments? Please take that opportunity to, again, put that in the chat for him and or unmute yourself and make that information available to the whole committee and the public.
Madam Chairwoman?
Yes, sir.
We did send a note to the mayor's office that the committee was running late.
Sure.
So we'll try to, I see that Mr.
The mayor's
Boyd-
office is joined with a number of staff people, and I'm assuming that I just saw something as you were speaking.
Okay.
And so maybe in just a moment we will be ready. But I thank you for alerting them, and I appreciate having your vigilance. They're helping us in the background.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions that have come forward. And so now we can move forward with our next presentation. The mayor's office is online now, and we would like to bring before the committee now our Mayor Tashara Jones. I did see the chief of staff and a couple other people already online. If you'd like to chime in and or send me a note.
Good morning, Alderwoman Davis.
There you are. Okay. Well, welcome, Madam Mayor. We are very appreciative that I know how busy you are, that you allowed us into your schedule today so that we could hear from you. Our public loves to hear from you, and we most definitely want to have that direct communication. So I'm going to allow you to start. You may share any of your staff that you would like to give any kinds of presentations and or answer questions for you. But we'd like to hear from you for your explanation of the budget that has come before us. Thank you.
Great.
Great. Well, thank you for having me today, and it's an honor to be here and see all of you during my first Ways and Means presentation as the mayor. So these first 4 weeks have been quite the roller coaster, but my team and I have already set St. Louis on a new path. I've kept some of my promises for the campaign, and to nobody's surprise, we've pushed back and established some new things going forward. We're on a path to try to make some real transformational and lasting change. So some of the things that we have submitted with this year's budget, we took $7.8 million from the workhouse to close the workhouse and redirected $4 million to close the budget gap, $2 million for meals and medical services for our detainees, $1.3 million for the Division of Supportive Reentry, which will support social workers, case management, mental health services, childcare, and other wraparound services. $300,000 for doubling the Civilian Oversight Board budget to increase the capacity of correctional investigators looking into acts of retaliation and neglect within our jails, and $150,000 for community visioning and planning around improvements to the workhouse, municipal courts, and the old police department headquarters buildings. Also, I signed Executive Order number 1 to direct all civilian complaints against police officers to the Civilian Oversight Board, and reallocated $4 million in unused police staffing funds, supporting $1.5 million to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, $1 million towards victim support services, including supporting funeral expenses, medical needs, childcare, mental health support, crisis management, as well as trauma-informed support, $1 million towards increasing the capacity of the Department of Human Services to support the unhoused, and $500,000 towards affirmative litigation, directing the city counselor's office to provide prosecutorial support to the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency. I want to thank all of the aldermen for the huge response that we've seen for the call for public input for how to spend the stimulus dollars that are on our way. Many alders have distributed the surveys in our wards, and we've received over 2,400 survey responses. And our Stimulus Advisory Board data and evaluation team have analyzed those responses, and they're available on the archive meeting videos on STLTV's YouTube page. As I explained a few weeks ago, we recognize the singular opportunity to use $500 million to fund bold investments designed to transform the city. And my administration is currently focused on direct relief, which will be the first $50 million on meeting the critical needs of individuals, families, businesses, neighborhoods across the city, and getting those funds out quickly. I thank you for the opportunity to present this morning. And at this time, I'll take any questions you have.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll start with our committee members. Alderman Boyd.
No questions.
Thank you. Alderman Vaccaro.
Yeah, I have no questions at this time either. I'll wait.
Thank you. Alderwoman Howard.
Thank you for joining us, Mayor Jones. It's good to see your face, and I have no questions at this time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Boyd. She still hasn't got here yet. Okay. Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for being here today. And thank you for the update and the overview of the budget in a general sense. It's my understanding, and it's, I guess, customary that the mayor would describe or maybe present the budget of the mayor's office. Was that going to come, should we reserve questions for that particular, are you going to present that separately, or is that going to be, or was this presentation inclusive of that?
May I interject?
Madam Mayor, I think you're on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We can't hear you.
I'm not on mute. It's just an overlap. Alderwoman Davis.
Yes, I wanted to interject. That is a part of the presentation. Where we are is we all have your budget in front of us. And please feel free, committee people, to ask questions for the budget of the mayor's office. Go right ahead, Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Mayor, were you going to present the budget for your office separately? That would be my first question.
If you have any questions about our budget, Jared Boyd, our Chief of Staff and Counsel, has those details, so feel free to ask.
Great.
I guess my question was just that, is there going to be a presentation on the mayor's office's budget?
I think we've asked and answered. And could we have the Chief of Staff go through the mayor's budget for our office, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the board. My name is Jared Boyd. For those of you who I haven't had a chance to meet, honored to serve as Chief of Staff, and I'll just go over some highlights of the budget. Originally, this budget was actually submitted by the previous administration, just based on the timing of the transition. So it can look a little, I guess, deceiving in the sense that the previous administration was submitting a budget based upon their office structure. And as you know, that changed, and we think Budget Director Payne for kind of changing the budget to reflect the mayor's preferred structure of the office. So, you know, the mayor has slightly increased the budget for this department in light of just the enormous challenges that we're going to be managing with respect to COVID recovery, the American Rescue Act funds, and other issues that the city faces. So the raise is about 6%. We would note that our former mayor Cruson raised her budget by 13% in her first year. So it's somewhat customary to come into office and want to essentially staff in a way that kind of reflects the priorities of the mayor. So going through the actual table of positions, like I said, is a little bit confusing because Mayor Cruson submitted this budget. So of course have a mayor, of course have a chief of staff, again, the executive director of development and executive director of operations. Those roles haven't been eliminated per se. They've been switched to from 23 M's to 21 M's. So they are in that category of executive secretaries to the mayor, in addition to, I believe, a equity director who we've yet to hire. As many of you recall, Nicole Hudson previously held that position, so we're looking to bring that back. We also have brought in some additional special assistance in this budget to handle specific issues. And then a public information officer, and then some special projects assistance that will handle additional issues in projects. Last but not least, there is a partially funded grant position for someone who helps with children and families. So that position is partially grant funded, partially funded, and that's in the 1206 kind of category. So. Happy to entertain any additional questions.
Thank you, Jared. So it looks like if in a general sense, the staffing is gone up significantly. It looks like there's a significant amount of reduction in education and training and operations for the office. It could just be that there's new classification of expenditures, as you were pointing out, but I'm just curious if you can help me understand the significant reductions in those areas.
I think there are some kind of reclassifications, but at the same time, I don't, to be candid, I think that with respect to some of those services, you know, we respected and kind of abided by the previous administration's request for those trainings. I think that there are a number of ways that we can obtain and leverage trainings that potentially don't require city funds. So, we looked at last year's expenditures and kind of respected that original request because it's somewhat in line with last year's actual expenditure.
So from a general sense, the increase in staffing, can you just help us understand what we can expect? Is there going to be significant shifts or interactions that we can expect from this administration? Just from a functional perspective, Jared, just so we can understand how the office is going to be operating.
Sure. I don't think I'll push back a little bit. I don't think it's going to be a significant increase. Like I said, based upon precedent, we are looking to add some additional bodies in the office, like I said, to handle some of the vast challenges that we're going to be managing in light of ARPA. We don't want to create, it will require a mixture of additional city employees, contractors, and vendors or other types of structures. And in increasing our staff by 1 to 2 FTEs, we think that's appropriate in light of the fact that we're going to be managing such a large task, and don't want to create too many more civil service positions that Paul Payne mentioned that we would not be able to pay for once these funds actually subside. So that's the rationale.
Okay, but you're not really so the specifics. The specific sort of arrangement will come later then, or?
So yeah, we are continuing in week 4. We're actually in a place where we'd be inaugurated. So we are continuing to hire folks and still have jobs posted on the website. So if you know of good people, send them our way. But just to kind of go through, like I said, the anticipated staffing model, retaining some of the traditional roles, director of operations, director of policy and development. So expanding Linda's role, previous role, chief equity officer. Like I said, that's a position that we're bringing back. So that's one of the new positions, but it's really an old position. And then adding another special projects manager. So.
Okay, yeah, it just looks like there's some reorganization here as far as the line item goes, the zeroing out of the executive director for the development, but that's an actual position that's just been reclassified, Jared, then?
Correct.
When it's appropriate, perhaps the mayor's office could share the organizational chart as it's being developed here. I know that this is still early in the administration, but just given that there are going to be some changes, and it'd be helpful for the Board of Aldermen to better understand how that is going to be just deployed would be helpful. I have no further questions. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Alderwoman, oh, I'm sorry, I almost skipped you. Alderman John Muhammad Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions for the mayor or the chief of staff. Thank you.
All right, sir. Alderman Oldenburg.
Thank you, Chairwoman. No questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alderwoman Navarro.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you, Madam Mayor, for being here. I just have a couple of quick questions, and the first one probably is for you, Jared, just because I'm not familiar with all of the grade codes, but I just want to clarify so that executive director of development and director of operations are going from essentially a cabinet level position to a civil service position. Is that what the grade code change means? No. Okay, I'm sorry. So so those 2 positions are now showing up in the line item for, well, can you just tell me which line item those move to? Sure. I guess I thought it was going to, is it executive secretary to the mayor?
I believe that's the case, yes.
Okay. so what is so from going from, what does the grade change mean from 23M to 21M? I just am not familiar with that.
We are getting familiar with the civil service code. We came from the county office world, so it is a mystery to us in some respects, but we're learning about it. It's simply the pay grade and kind of an assignment that's within the civil service book and classification. But in actuality, like I said, director of operations, the director of development, now it's director of development and policy. Noelle Pfeffer handles that right now, and a chief equity officer. So it's simply a salary classification. And as we become more acquainted with civil service, hopefully we'll have some consistency in the way that those positions are reflected. Like I said, this chart reflects 2 different administrations. So next year will be a lot easier to kind of ascertain what people do.
Gotcha. Thank you. That's very helpful. And then the other one, it's a relatively small amount, and I'm just curious about it. The mayor's contingent fund, and maybe this is just a rollover of what was in there last year, $30,000. I'm just curious if there are ideas for what that might go towards.
I think that is, it's similar to kind of the aldermanic account. I think it in the sense that you all are provided with funds that you can either draw down from for cost, or simply take without kind of accounting for, I guess, those expenses. Is that what I understand to be the case, Mayor? It's similar to the aldermanic account.
That's exactly what that is. It is the just like the aldermanic account that you use for travel and constituent services. That's been there for years.
Okay, I don't know if I'm familiar with exactly which account that is, but it was 0 in 2019, and there wasn't any expenditure in 2020. So that's why it seemed like I thought maybe it came up last year due to COVID or something like that. I'm not sure what the
previous mayor received it. You have an opportunity to either leave it with the comptroller's office and submit your expenses to the comptroller, your contingency expenses, your travel to the comptroller, or you can elect to have it added to your salary, which is what the previous mayor did.
So essentially where it shows up is based upon the mayor's preference.
Okay.
For that particular year.
Great, thank you. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alderwoman Middlebrook.
Thank you. I have no questions at this time.
Okay. Alderwoman Evans.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome, Madam Mayor. Glad to see you in our meeting today. I only have a question, and that is, are you still accepting the surveys on recommendations for spending the stimulus funds? And if so, could I receive a copy of the survey that was sent out?
Yes, absolutely. We are still accepting, and Well can email you a copy of the survey, hard copy as well.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
And
your
Madam Mayor,
attendance here.
yeah. Madam Mayor, I'm going to ask that you please send that to all of the alderpersons, because we get so much email. And when we want to act on something, I don't know why we don't use the search engines, but we'd like to send that out again. So please send it to all alderpersons, your hard copy as well as an email. We will appreciate that.
Will do.
Thank you.
Okay. It looks like Alderwoman Rice. Did you have any questions? I didn't see her leave.
She also dropped the link to the survey in the chat.
That. Okay. And Alderman Page.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and especially thank you, Madam Mayor. I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. I did want to come back and just ask a couple of questions myself. Madam Mayor, one of the things that I talk a lot to my constituents about is having a better understanding of what it means for the word defund police, because they're very confused. I've explained it the best I could, but I need them to hear it from you because you are the one who is leading our city and they must have the trust from. If you don't mind explaining a little bit.
Yes, thank you, Alderwoman Davis. So in this year's budget, we moved $4 million from the police budget sorry, let me put that down. There were $4 million moved from the police budget of unfilled police positions. These positions had been unfilled for years. And the police chief himself said that they were having difficulty filling them for years. We worked with the police chief as well as their budget people to identify money that was not being used in the police budget. And it was from this line item of unfilled vacancies. And what we're using that money to do is to transform public safety and invest in things that actually make people safe. So as I explained before, that $4 million will go to, that $4 million will, $1.5 million will be allocated to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. $1 million is going to go to victim support services, including supporting funeral expenses, medical needs, childcare, mental health support, case and crisis management, as well as trauma-informed support. And that money is really important, and I'll explain why. Because a lot of times, if we can support victims at the time that the crime occurs, and give them supports that they and their families need, oftentimes that can divert future crime from happening. So we also put $1 million towards increasing the capacity of the Department of Human Services to support the unhoused. And also that will allow us to hire 15 to 20 additional social workers and other mental health professionals. We also put $500,000 towards affirmative litigation, which is going to help the City Councilor's office support the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency. A lot of times the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency tries to help people who have been discriminated against due to a whole host of reasons, but most frequently related to their housing or trying to get an apartment. And so this money will help us help the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency hold landlords accountable when they are discriminating against people for housing issues. And so these are a plethora of things that will help keep people safe. These are those root causes that I talked about oftentimes on the campaign trail that we have to invest in order to put the public back in public safety.
Okay, that answers that for me. I hope that gave clarity to the public because they do need to have that. And my last thing is, I don't know how most people feel about it, but it appears to be across the country that laws are going to be put in place to say it's okay to be homeless. It is never okay to be homeless. And that should never be a law that says, oh, you have the right to sleep on the street in the element. And by the way, leave them alone. That should never be our mindset, and it should never be the law. So as we move forward, are we looking to increase the amount of dollars to provide transitional housing? And we do know that in many cases, some people need to be in environments where they have social support, and we have people who need medical support, whether it's physical and or mental. And we also need to help people get jobs. So are we going to be looking at how we improve that versus the saying, oh, it's okay, leave them alone, let them be homeless?
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. The $1 million that we're sending to the Department of Human Services will help us do just that. It will help us support our unhoused. Also, we're looking at ways to spend American Recovery Act funds to support our unhoused. Noel, do you want to provide a little more color on some of our plans there?
Sure, and it's really designed to wrap our arms around the city's unhoused population, which is such a vulnerable population. And whether or not it's all right to be homeless, we have to deal with the reality that we have an eviction crisis on our hands, and we will have a large homeless population in the city come the summer, and we already do, in fact. And so we're looking to establish an intentional encampment in order to support them, because unfortunately we do need to provide transitional housing supports, we do need rapid rehousing monies, and we need to wrap our arms around this issue with an intentional encampment, emergency shelter, safe haven, and really providing folks with the case management supports to be able to transition towards a more sustainable path.
That was helpful. One of the things that budgets and numbers don't always reflect is our intentions. So I'm glad to hear those statements. I wanted to move forward because when I asked for questions from Alderman, where am I at here? Alderman Boyd, did you ask the questions that you felt necessary?
Madam Chair, I have no questions. Thank you.
You want to stay there? Okay, thank you. Alderwoman Howard, I see your hand up again.
Yes, back to the homeless situation. What is the homeless count currently? Do we know that?
I don't have that at this moment. I can look into that.
But I think last year it was around 1,200. I don't know, like you said, the impact of the pandemic and so forth. I guess my sense is, and what I have is, many of my constituents are concerned that, they're paying taxes, and we have a homeless situation down here on the south side also. And they feel a little left out of the loop because, here people are camping maybe on their front porch or wherever. And, it doesn't seem to be addressed or to get them to move off. I understand that these are complex issues with people that, sometimes they're impacted by drug abuse, mental health issues, and it's a very complicated issue. But I mean, we have many private people that provide services for these people. And I feel as though sometimes they're very resistant to that. So I'm wondering, what is the approach here, and what are we doing to get them off of people's property? We have businesses that are having trouble with encampments and so forth. So, and I do understand their angst because they're paying the taxes, they're paying the freight for our city, and they feel as though they're not being heard. What do we intend to do to address those issues? Thank you.
Would you like me to speak to this as well, Madam Mayor?
Go for it.
So this is exactly why we're trying to identify a location, or perhaps more than one location, for an intentional encampment. So we can take these folks who are currently living on the street and wrap our arms around them, find a situation, find a physical location where they can feel secure, where we can have regular touch points for services, for mental health providers to check in, for individuals who can help them find transitional housing or job training. And this is all, we have protocols we follow when we move encampments. And there's a lot of individuals who need to be at the table because it is such a nuanced decision. But if you are interested in exploring that, I encourage you to reach out to our office and DHS, and we can find that conversation, which will involve the people who work, the impacted people, the impacted voices. And we need to make sure that what we're doing isn't just what works best for the property owners, but also for the vulnerable individuals who are very much at risk. You're muted.
Alderwoman Ingracia found the number last count. So I guess that was in January when they do their count, January or February. It's 1,260. And I'm not going to take up any more time with this. I will deal with it off on our own here. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Alderwoman Howard. I think that is one of those conversations that it needs to be more inclusive of all those who are responsible for the betterment of the city and the residents of the city. There are a lot of services that are not being used adequately. And I think that we could help more people help themselves so that they won't become homeless. Having a lot of documents and a lot of rhetoric probably doesn't help as much as having more direct contact, and most especially a lot of information about how you can be helped. And so I do thank all of you for your questions. I also most especially thank you, Madam Mayor, for being present and for having all of your staff ready and available. That is one of those things that at the end of the day, it's sometimes hard to do, to gather everyone. So if, Madam Mayor, do you have any final words?
No, ma'am. Thank you for the opportunity to present today.
Okay, we're looking forward to working together. We have some trying times, and let's prove to the United States of America, who chooses to put us as number one on every negative list in the country, that we can get it done. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We're ahead of schedule, committee. That is another wonderful thing. I'm going to ask if there's any staff listening that we are ready for President of the Board of Aldermen, Louis Reed, and his staff. I'm looking forward to having his words come to the public and going through his budget. So if we'd like to start early, if you're ready, we can.
Yes, Madam Chair, this is Tom Shepard. I'm ready where I can present the budget for the Board of Aldermen. Yes.
The president going to be joining us?
I can see if he can get on. We had gotten word that it would be a little later.
If he's going to join us later and you'd like to start off, that is okay. But we do expect to see him.
Okay, great. So I'll get started, and let me just make sure that he's knows that we're going a little earlier.
Right.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, committee. Hopefully everyone has the Board of Aldermen's budget in front of them. This year's budget is, except for 3 line items, is pretty similar to last year's budget. Salaries, personal services includes the 2% or 1.5% salary increase that city employees get on the anniversary date. I believe the Board of Aldermen, or what we have been doing in the past, is everyone just gets their salary increase January 1st. So there's, so the salaries for the numerous positions stay equitable in pay throughout the year. Materials and supplies, the next section, pretty much the same. Or
Mr. Shepherd, may
Yeah.
I interrupt for just a second?
Yes.
I know what we didn't do. We didn't appropriately introduce you, and that is not fair to you or anyone who is listening. And I will apologize for that.
I think the whole world knows me for some reason.
Nah,
know
it's not like that.
I know it.
Alderwoman Howard, you had your hand up too.
I didn't take it down from before, sorry.
Okay, thank you. But I would like to go back and digress and be appropriate. Our president of the Board of Aldermen and his office, we are looking at that budget for them and how we operate the Board of Aldermen. Here presenting the budget to us is his Chief of Staff, Thomas Shepherd. Our president of the board will probably be joining us a little later because they were scheduled for noon and we're a little ahead of schedule. But since he's available, we're going to get the budget presented and then we will hear from our president and possibly end earlier than we thought. You may continue, Mr. Shepherd.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, we're going over the budget for the Board of Aldermen for this upcoming fiscal year. I'll go back from the beginning. Personal services, which is just salary and fringe benefits. The only difference between last year and this year, the current year and the numbers in the proposed budget for next year is the mainly just the 1.5% citywide salary increase that all employees get. The Board of Aldermen staff typically all take that salary increase January 1st because we have positions that offer the same rate of pay with, some different anniversary dates. So we don't want a situation where someone, just because they started the job in July, is making more money for 9 months because somebody else started the job in April and they would have to wait till April to get their raise. So typically what we've done is give everyone their raise January 1st. So that's incorporated in this budget and it's, so that's an increase from last year. If you drop down a little further down, the section that says materials and supplies, exact same numbers as last year's budget. We don't expect much change in operations as far as that's concerned. But if we look down further, contractual and other services, what we've added to the budget this year that we didn't have last year is $20,000 in computer and technology services, $100,000 in professional services, and $100,000 for legal services. And what we've added this money into the budget for is to help us throughout the redistricting process that we're going to be going through. It's a, we're reducing the board due to a charter change, but it's, uncharted territory, I guess I'll say, for this board, for the city of St. Louis. So we want to make sure that we have access to professionals that can help us throughout the process and that can also represent the board, possibly if need be, after the map is complete. It's a pretty litigious environment we're in right now. The city councilor's office is, seems to be, dealing with a lot of lawsuits. I think for I don't know how many times we've had Democratic caucus meetings, but the Democratic Party or the Board of Aldermen is being sued for having a caucus meeting. So the city council's office, and then they're dealing with a lot of other lawsuits, and there, maybe legislation relating to COVID restrictions or litigation relating to COVID restrictions. So we felt it best, considering how unique this situation is for the city of St. Louis, and how important it is for the city of St. Louis that we get it done right, in a way where it can withstand scrutiny and offers equal opportunity for being represented in the political process. We felt it best to include this in the budget so that we have access to those kind of services. $20,000 would be to purchase software to help us with the redistricting. And that's it. I mean, we have some vacant positions that a personnel meeting will be getting called soon so that we can get those filled. And yeah, other than that, 220,000 is being added in to help us in the redistricting process. This is pretty much the same budget as last year, or the current year, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Let's start with our committee members so that we can have an opportunity to get these questions. And Alderman Boyd.
Sure. Good morning, Mr. Shepherd. How are you?
Great.
I was wondering if the Board of Aldermen was going to catch up with other offices by having a color copier so that we can make better presentations to the public. I've only been asking for a decade. For some reason, we've been reduced to just old brother copy machines that take like 2 minutes to print a copy.
I would say I can talk to the clerk and let's get that ordered. We probably have some money available. It's a little late in this year to transfer money, but it's possible that we have some money available. Well, I know we have money available in our total budget due to the vacancies that we've had. So I can try to get that done this year. If not, or we could add some money to our budget in order to make sure that we can do that. It's probably going to be a necessity with the redistricting process, or not a necessity, but I think it would help greatly if we had.
Yeah, I think it would help us with some of the information that we send out. It's just, presentation is everything. So, excuse me. That's just my only small request, that if we could somehow find money in the budget. Also, I was wondering, back in the day, we used to have aldermen that would go to National League of Cities, conferences, and somehow that money just kind of disappeared out of the budget. Do you see that coming back into the budget where aldermen would have an opportunity to go to other cities and learn best practices on city government?
Yeah, currently there is a line item in the budget currently for it. It's $2,600. And under education and training is where that in the past, where that kind of travel and training was being paid for. In fiscal year 20, there was only $1,800 spent out of that account, but there's $2,600 in the account currently in the budget. But there's another line item that, this, of course, this committee could make an amendment and part of what's sent back to ENA to add some money to that account. But there's currently $2,600 in the account for it.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Vaccaro.
Yes, mine is the same thing I bring up every time we talk, and that's the stamp. I'd rather have a mailing budget, or however you want to do it. I don't know that I could fit any more stamps in my drawer. I currently have, like if I sold them on the street, I think I have over $7,000 in stamps in my drawer. And I think we'd be much better off and a lot more efficient. If somebody wants stamps, certainly should get stamps, and, I bring it up and I think we either need to go to, so we can mail things out through a mailing house, which would save, it would double the amount, of actually mailing ability. So, I mean, it's just something that's really there all the time. It can be either added to the alderman's personal budget, or it could be an allowance. But, and for those that want stamps, they could have stamps. And for those that have rather, because even it becomes a problem to mail out the good neighbor guides, which I'd like to mail mine out, but I don't feel like putting stamps on 5,000 pieces of mail and hand addressing them, when I could just go to a mailing house for way less money. They can address and mail everything out. Doing mass mailings, become an issue. I know some older people prefer stamps, but I think it should come out of a budget where we say, okay, I'd rather not just keep getting stamps. And I'd much rather get, have a mailing budget that I turn in, where I say, gee, I'm going to do a mailing, and the mailing is going to cost, because like I said, all these good neighbor guides in particular, I got 5,000 of those to mail out, unless I can find friends, family, because we're not allowed to use the secretaries here anymore to address all that stuff or put labels on all of them. It used to be the secretaries would just divide it up and put the labels and the stamps on. We don't do that. So it's just a thing that, and everybody's afraid to bring it up, but,
I think that's something that could be, as far as the budget, I think the amount of money
it's the same
is in the budget.
Right.
So, and I know there's been discussions about this. I know at one point the board had a postage meter. Mail service would probably at this point be more efficient. But as as far as that internal policy, I guess, of how we're going to allow that money to be used, we could discuss that in personnel if it needs to be formal like that.
I'm hoping that other of the alders feel the same way I do. That
I believe most of them do. But sorry, go ahead.
No, I do.
Then I just like to bring that back up, and either way, do it in the expense where some people take and don't take, or we do it in a, gee, I'm going to do a mailing, because right now I believe we get $200 a month in stamps. I've been here 12 years, and just for the heck of it, because I asked Teresa the other day, and this is after giving stamps to other alders that do use mail and neighborhood organizations and everything else. I believe at this point I have a little over $7,000 in stamps sitting in a drawer. And the reason I bring that up, I noticed that when some of the other people that left, their stamps left with them, which is strange too, because I talked to one of the new older people that said, gee, you know what? I don't have any stamps. So is this something that I don't want to be taxed on, that I have $7,000 worth of stamps? As far as I'm concerned, They don't belong to me. But they're sure gonna pile up in my drawer. So anyway, it's just a pet peeve and something that, you know, nobody wants to discuss publicly, but I think it's something that we really have to look at. So
What I could say is that, we could, maybe the, president of the board, as the chair of personnel, we could just, that our office could send a letter to the clerk and the administrative assistant to the board to just hold off, as of July 1st, hold off on any stamp purchases, and we'll do a poll of aldermen to see who would like to still receive the allotment of stamps that they're getting now, and the money that would be left from the people that don't want to continue to receive stamps, we could use for the service that more people would want to have.
So I could turn a bunch of my stamps in and you can give me a mailing credit. I got a drawer full. Anyway, I just bring it up because it to me, it's just an issue. And again, I just don't do a lot of mailings, and, and again, I'd like to figure a way to get all these good neighbor guides out. And if I can get all the aldermen to help me participate, addressing 5,000 and putting 5,000 stamps on a whole bunch of good neighbor guides, then I guess I won't complain about this. The stamps.
So, and I didn't know, so the executive secretary don't do that anymore?
Right.
No,
they don't.
they
Well, yeah, under Sweeney, because what was happening was everybody was turning in like literally thousands of good neighbor guides all at the same time because they come all at the same time. And so, it became more of a full-time job, not even answering the phone, but labeling and I mean, I think they were doing even overtime training, because when you got half the aldermen, giving you 5,000 things saying, I want mine first. I'm not worried about the other odd wards or even wards, plus the other mailings that we asked them to do. It was like a full-time project. And I think they were the ones that objected, saying, gee, you know what?
Right.
We can't even do our regular work when we're doing literally tens of thousands of mailings.
Yeah, and I think now most aldermen, I believe, are receive also an electronic version of it that they could send out through email.
No, that works good if all your constituents have. I represent an
along
area
with the
that
printed
has
version.
young
Alderman, excuse me, I need to interrupt. Alderman Vaccaro.
Yes, I will drop off.
Yeah, because this is an
I have to leave at
operation.
noon anyway. I have a noon thing.
Irregardless, what we're trying to do now is deal with budget items, and now
Well,
we've
was
gone into operations.
Right.
And so
Well, this is-
operations will be handled at a different place.
I
Okay.
agree. This is a budget. To me, it was a budget thing.
All right.
And I agree, but I will hold off. But thank you.
Thank you very much. Alderwoman Howard.
She's on mute. Yeah.
Unmute yourself.
You're on mute, Alderwoman Howard.
She's still not realizing she's still muted.
Oh, duh.
There
Sorry.
you go. I didn't hear anything.
I said, I will, I think would be best put over in a different committee, maybe rules or someplace else. We've
It
talked
goes in
to
personnel.
death.
Yeah.
It could have maybe went over into our caucus and been a discussion there, but we've caucused that also, and we still get stamps. So it's okay. I'll take my stamps until they no longer, and maybe get a postal machine, or we do it online some other way. We need to get in the 21st century. So, okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, we'll move on to Alderwoman Boyd.
have no questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Tom, for answering our questions here today. I just had a couple of quick ones. The computer technology stuff, does this mean that that we all are getting, I still haven't gotten a computer or any, is this something that we're going to be doing universally, or what is the process for, and maybe I missed the boat on that. I haven't been paying, I never really personally requested one. So just curious for the new members and for sake of uniformity and for understanding here the resources, are we going to be doing something along those lines, or is that more for the staff? I want to make sure that we first address the needs of our hardworking staff, but
So are you're referring to the additional 20,000 in the budget?
yes, that.
Well, the main purpose of that would be, and not completely sure what the exact cost would be or total cost would be, to buy the software that's going to be necessary throughout the redistricting process.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. So that's technology services specific to redistricting. My apologies on that.
Yeah. So it would be, and then, a PC, possibly a projector with a projection screen so that, members could see the map clearly and hold various meetings looking over the map. So that's what the 20,000 is for.
Okay, so just for my understanding, do we have needs for the Board of Aldermen outside of this budget? For example, do we have needs that are unmet for our staff, or anything else that we can and should be advocating for when we're looking at the budget? I realize we're largely the same, but we, may have needs that are not met. Just in recognizing the significant increase in some of the other departments, want to make sure that all the needs of our community, our Board of Aldermen community, are met. And I haven't taken a personal audit there. So if there's something for which we should be advocating, please let us know.
Well, I see the clerk is on.
Mr. Clerk popped on, and Mr. Clerk, maybe this is something you could better answer. I just want to make sure that we're taking care of our own Board of Aldermen community here during the budget process, and asking those questions on behalf of all of our hardworking staff.
May I speak on Madam Chairman?
Absolutely, sir.
Okay, thank you for that question. The staff, so that you know, we're looking at upgrading the board. We're looking at several legislative computer programs that we believe would bring the board into the 21st century. There's a cost related to that. We're also looking at various companies who can do the digitizing of the old past information of the board. There are records that go all the way back in the archive room to 1962 or so. Actually, there's a few of them that go back to 1940. And we're looking to have all that scanned and in a database. So we do not have all those costs yet. Otherwise, we would have provided those to the president's office, so it could have been included in this budget. But those are the directions that the staff is working, trying to bring the board up to date. When I came into this position, there were some files in the clerk's office that went back to 1974, sitting in boxes. And if you came that summer, you would have seen us all moving those boxes over to many of you saw the boxes that we had piled up in the Kennedy room. There was over 271 boxes that we had moved.
Mr. Clerk, I did hear that it glitched out on the number. How many boxes was it?
It was over 271 boxes.
Wow.
I think it was like 275 or 76. And we tried to count them all, but we used some interns to help move them out of the closet and from the board chambers and into a redesigned archive room. That's that doorway as soon as you enter into the Kennedy room. It was
on the right?
Yes, as you're going on the right. There are new file cabinets in there that had to be, not file cabinets, new bookshelves or storage shelves that are in there. It was painted. It was completely redone so you can find, the information can be found more quickly. The ultimate goal is to digitize that information so that it can be in a database that can be retrieved more easily, and for all the people can do research about past board bills that have been passed and some of the information about it. That's what we're really trying to hit to. We've looked at 3 different companies at this point that can either digitize the information in that regard, as well as what they call the legislative programming for legislative bodies, like what you may see that the state of Missouri has. So there's a cost related to all of that, but we do not have the details of all of that at this point. Otherwise, we'd have let the president's office know so it could be in this budget. We will be giving an update on all of that to the Personnel and Administration Committee. And then at that point, we would have more details as which direction to go. So we want to advocate, we can always advocate for additional money into the budget for these things that some of them could take place in the next budgetary year, depending on how much is in the budget. We will have, there are a few positions that will not be immediately filled, and some of that money could be reallocated for the purchase of some of this stuff while trying to do the process of hiring new people for those positions.
Excellent.
And some older people also asked about making sure that we get a legislative research position. I'm hearing some noise. A legislative research position again, back in, it's still one of the positions in the table of organization for the board, just hasn't been filled in some time. So hopefully that gives you some information on what could be advocated for.
It does. Thank you so much. I'm glad to know that. And we'll stand by, ready to hear any more additional recommendations on things that the Board of Aldermen needs to fully enter the 21st century.
When I came here, you always had to have paper to introduce your board bill. Wasn't any computers.
Well, until very recently, we needed paper for amendments, and
right.
So absolutely. I mean, I think that's just changed within the last year. So,
if I may mention one other thing, Alderwoman, we did purchase laptops for all members of the board if they wanted to get one.
excellent. And I think I might have missed a communication on that end. So that's my apologies on that front. So, but you did mention that if there were unfilled positions, that there are funds left over. We've had some unfilled positions. Where have we successfully deployed those funds in other ways, or what happens?
For some of those, if I can answer that, Madam Chairwoman. Some of that was used some of those were reallocated to purchase the laptops.
I see. I see. And just really quickly on the process of the professional services and the legal services aspect, I know Tom was talking about the need for these things, especially when it comes to redistricting and some of the other more sensitive questions that may come up and sensitive issues. What is the process for choosing who will be getting those contracts and who will be assisting us in serving the needs of the Board of Aldermen with regards to professional legal services? And will there be a process for input from the board on those matters?
Yes. We'll develop a process for the board. We typically would go through an RFP process.
And that'll be like through the personnel committee, or?
Yeah, we could do it through the personnel committee or do a typical professional services RFP, where it would be a member from the comptroller's office, the mayor's office, and 3 members from the Board of Aldermen on the committee to select. But what we, believe we'll do is just select from the Board of Aldermen who will hire for that.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the additional information, and Mr. Clerk, thank you for jumping in and helping us better understand all the work that's going on behind the scenes that we may not be able to appreciate without having your insight and information on those ends. So, I'll follow up with any additional questions, Madam Chair. That's all the questions I have at this moment. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderman Collins Muhammad.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chief of Staff. And I guess my question would be for either the Chief of Staff or for the clerk. Are we fully staffed at the Board of Aldermen?
No.
No.
Right. And so when I say fully staffed, I don't mean with the positions that we currently have been occupied, but do we have the appropriate number of positions to satisfy the workload that the Board of Aldermen had?
I think the clerk would answer that question better.
No. Not in my opinion, if I may if I may continue, Madam Chairwoman.
Absolutely, sir.
One of the things we're also, no, in direct answer to your question, I would say no. But what is also happening is a reassessment based upon the technology of today. What works best for a legislative body? What is in the rules and in the Board of Aldermen's table of organization was designed for a board back in 1950 or 1960.
Thank you.
And with technology that is available today, and the demands upon the positions and the increased ability for transparency does, in my opinion, require a review of the table of the organization and an update of it. Things move much faster than what they did in the past. And that means then you have to have the staff to be able to do it. Unlike in the past, for example, when you produced the calendar letter, really, it just required you to send it out by mail to the members of the Board of Aldermen and then to post it on a bulletin board in the hallway of City Hall. That's really all you had to do to meet the requirements. But today you have to email it out. It has to be up on the website by a particular time. Not only does it continue to have to be posted outside, but then you have to make sure that it's in the mailboxes. There are a lot more requirements today that they really didn't have in the past. In the past, you could simply bring in a board bill in paper and the clerk would, or the staff would stamp it with the time, and that's what you introduced. Today, it is sent by email in its various parts and has to be reorganized and put back together. So there's, in many ways, much of the study has shown that in some ways, the computer age has reduced certain levels of work, but has increased others. And the board's table of organization in terms of the staffs does not reflect that. That's a long way to say no. In my opinion, as a clerk.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. And I asked that question just for one reason. I know that in the Board of Aldermen, we try to, we always penny pinch ourselves at the end of being fiscally responsible. But at the same time, we give out millions of dollars and more supplemental appropriations to other divisions, offices in for the 4 years that I've served on, my 5th year now for my, in the years that I've served on things, it seems like that we always negate and neglect our own staff and our own priorities in the Board of Aldermen. And especially now with the role of aldermen that's consistently changing.
Right.
Just want to make sure that we are not doing a disservice to ourselves and our staff, because I know our staff is overworked completely. Just had that question. So I would like to see, our budget increase considerably, quite a bit, because I honestly can't think of another department or office inside city government that is more sought after or that has a heavier workload than the Board of Aldermen. In my, that's all I have. Thank you for the answer, Clerk and Mr. Chief of Staff. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank
All right, sir.
May I add an additional comment?
Go right ahead,
Madam
sir.
Chairman. When I first came into this position as clerk, the staff, we went through our own assessment and got all the staff's opinions about their positions and what kind of work they do. And we rewrote all of the job descriptions based upon the staff's input as well. That was presented to the Personnel and Administration Committee and was adopted. We were moving in the direction of assessing everything and reassessing so that a more data-based proposal could be presented to the Personnel Administration Committee. Then COVID hit and we went into emergency mode. And we've kind of been in emergency mode since then, which has been a little bit more difficult to get back to that process. If you remember, I put forward some goals and objectives to be achieved and some dates. Well, we've had to kind of revise that, but we're still pushing in that direction so that it'll be data driven in making the determination as to what types of additional positions or positions they need to be rewritten. And I think that we're at a place now to be able to make that recommendation to the Personnel Administration Committee in this session. I just wanted to bring us up to date on that, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you very much. It's been very helpful. I learned a lot from this. Thank you. Alderwoman Boyd.
I just want to apologize. I'm driving, and so I had hit the button. I was talking to somebody driving. It was this way, so I apologize.
Okay, did you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. A lot of them have been answered, and I am honored with our clerk because he is trying to bring us up, as we say, to the 21st century. So that's a help, and I agree with the previous auto people that we have our jobs to kind of change, so we need to look at what's best fit for the Board of Aldermen, and we can't do what we've done in the past and penny pinch ourselves. So thank you. That's all I had.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderwoman Navarro.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you, Tom. I just have a few items. One, I'll just start by echoing Alderman Vaccaro about stamps. I think there's probably a more cost-effective way that we could be using that fund. So I won't go on about it, but just, want to second that or third, fourth it. And I'm happy to help figure out a way to do that as someone who has had to just pay for mailings personally, like so many of us have, because we just can't manage the stamps. But, and then I also wanted to echo Alderman Boyd about the education and training, the 2,600. It's great we've got something in there. As somebody who's paid my own way to some of these conferences, that gets one person to a conference once you pay for hotel and airport and the registration fees. So if there's any way, we can make that doable. And I know we've got our our fund, our discretionary fund, but you use half a year's funding at least, maybe the whole year, and go into one conference. So anything we can do there is always helpful. But along those lines, the education and training for staff, and I'm specifically thinking, we've got an attorney and hopefully we'll have a financial analyst, and I know that they often have CLEs and bar fees and registration dues and that sort of thing. Is that reflected in this budget? Do we cover those costs for those employees?
From my understanding, yes, they've come out of education and training. Is that correct, Mr. Clerk?
From my understanding, they can. There had been some ambiguity about it, not being clear. So if they can come out of that, they can. Mm-hmm.
It's at zero though right now. So I don't know if that means we're not, or I just didn't know if it came out of something. I'm looking at under materials and supplies, education and training. I know it's in here twice too, also as contractual.
Oh.
So I'm not sure which, I don't know where it is if it's in here.
I would consider the line item you're looking at as something.
May I jump in?
Physical that's used to train people, I guess. Some, maybe equipment or something like that, or a computer, or something, tangible. And the, for, something like CLE, I would imagine that falling under education services, which has the $2,600 in it.
Okay, so that's what that covers.
Yes.
May I add to that, please? Professional licensing is normally not paid for through the Board of Aldermen. That is a personal expense because if you are going to, say for instance, if you are a licensed real estate agent, would you want us to also pay for that as well at the Board of Aldermen? Or a registered nurse if you were employed by the Board of Aldermen? So that normally has not been paid. So that's why
I'm speaking specifically about the lawyer who works for the board who cannot practice law if he's not licensed through the bar. So I'm not talking about if there's a staff member who also is a real estate agent or a nurse. We don't hire nurses, we don't hire real estate agents, but we do hire an attorney. And it is customary, at least in my experience, that your employer pays those fees because they can't employ you if you're not licensed. So I was just
Right. And
curious.
we should take that up at the personnel committee.
Well, it sounds like, according to Tom, that would be coming out of this 2,600. So it sounds like maybe we are, which I mean, I would hope that we would be covering it. And if it's in here, that's great.
I would say that would be where I would see it would be coming from. But I guess that would, at the end of the day, policy wise, be a discussion for the personnel committee.
Okay. Well, thank you. And then the last one, I just wanted to go back to so for redistricting, we've got the professional services and legal services. And and I know we had a little discussion about, who will hire that person or contract that out. But are you anticipating that would be a demographer, or what kind of service do you anticipate?
For the professional service?
Yes, yeah, to help to assist with the redistricting.
Yeah, I mean, that could be, one of the services that we would need throughout the process would be a demographer. Anyone, that has, experience and expertise that could add value to the process to make sure that we, develop a map that's, we go through a transparent process. We develop a map that's fair, allows everyone equal opportunity at political participation. Anyone that would be, deemed that would help us throughout that process.
Got it. So it might be like community outreach or
Sure.
Something like that too. Okay. I was just curious if you had something anticipated there. And then for the legal services, do you think that would be specific, like contingency if there is litigation over it, or is it the sort of thing that we might consult? I mean, I guess we have an attorney on the board now, but I didn't know if you thought we would be consulting with outside attorneys along the way. And again, I'm just curious if there's what you're anticipating, if anything, at this point.
Yes, Alderwoman, I would anticipate some talks with attorneys, getting some legal advice prior to the map being completed. But then also, after the map is completed, to help defend the legitimacy of the map in case there's some suit or something like that.
Gotcha. And we hope that 100,000 is enough.
It's not enough.
Exactly. Yeah, probably not.
It's not enough.
Great. Well, thank you. Those were all of my questions. I appreciate it, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you, Tom.
Oh, absolutely. Alderwoman Middlebrook.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. At this time, I have no questions. They have been answered, and the comments I was going to make were pretty much made. Thank you.
All right. Alderwoman Evans.
Madam Chair, I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. So I saw Alderwoman Ingracia has left. Alderman Page, are you still there? I saw a message. All right, go ahead.
Thank you so much for an excellent hearing. I find the stamps discussion extraordinarily fascinating, probably because I was a 38-year employee of the United States Postal Service.
Oh my goodness, you can help.
With that, I have no further questions. Thank you again.
All right, thank you, sir. Alderwoman Rice. Looks like she's left too. So let's move forward. Mr. Shepherd, I really don't have any specific questions about the budget because you all know how I feel. I think it's a very inadequate budget. for a department as large as it is, that should be larger and should have the ability to have more professional assistance. So if it was me and I had the funds, I would probably add an additional $500,000 to your budget. But we are not in that position, and we shall try to figure it out as we normally do. Did you have anything to close, sir?
No, I'd just like to thank the committee for their questions. Those were good questions, and we'll definitely move forward on the request with the color copier and looking at how we add more money to education and training. With the stamps discussion will happen in personnel, and let's see, Alderman Page is a member of personnel, so maybe that'll just be his
That'll help us.
thing. Yes, and but I just want to thank the committee.
All right, I got a message that President Reed is not able to come on. He's still involved with another matter, but he will come before us. And I think what we'll do is make him first tomorrow. Please check with his schedule. We expect all of our leaders to be heard from. And let's try to make that happen tomorrow because that entire day is going to be allocated to the Public Safety Department. So I'm sure that we could squeeze him in before or after, preferably before.
Okay, we'll do. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All righty. I have just a few statements before I go to the bottom of the agenda with the basic things. As you see, we have no resolutions before us, but committee discussion here, even though it says none, I probably should leave it at that and go to announcements. And I will make an announcement that anything that you have heard thus far that you believe you should propose an amendment, please do that now and or get the assistance of Paul Payne so that you can have that under scrutiny earlier versus later. And I would like to see that happen throughout this process. So as we finish each day, if you have discovered something new, please move forward and get that amendment in so that we can be ahead of the schedule versus on the last day scrambling. We also had a very good day, and I am going to again say that we are going to respect each other in our process. Know that we are here about the budget. I think we can do a little bit better of staying on topic, and probably I will interrupt sooner tomorrow when we're off topic. And now I'd like to ask if there are any other announcements from any committee members.
Madam Chairwoman, I don't have any announcement. I did notice that Alderman Dan Gunther and Sarah Martin was on, and I didn't know if they had any comments or if they had any questions about anything.
And yes, a couple of times I asked, please raise your hand and let me know in the chat if you wanted to ask questions.
Well, I was wondering, can we have these meetings for like 8 hours a day just to make sure we have adequate time to go over everything?
I know you have an issue of some sort today, so I shall go past that. How about that?
No further.
Probably tomorrow it might be 8 hours. We have 13 departments? It might be.
Oh my.
Yeah, so we shall see. And did anybody else have any comments?
I just want to tell Mr. Boyd to watch what he wished for, okay?
I know. You just might get it.
I've been here long enough to have done it too, trust me.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. And we don't need to excuse any aldermen. Everybody was present. And so we shall entertain an adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, I thank you for your time.